Welcome to another Soytheist live stream. Today we'll be responding, or rather reacting, to some Earthling Ed debates. The first one is called Earth, Student Confronts Vegan About Indigenous Culture. So, and so welcome. And if you're watching this on replay, there should be timestamps down below, if I haven't forgotten. So, anyway, with that cleared up, let's begin, right? And before we watch the video in question, let me run a disclaimer. On the thumbnail, you can see that I've put a text over myself and it says Indigenous Vegan. Now, I want to clarify that I am not indeed North American, but Indigenous doesn't just mean North American Indigenous. If you're talking about in the global context, as the people in this video, Earthling Ed and the woman that he is debating, do talk about, then indigenous people also includes people like me. I'm an indigenous tribal Northeast Indian person. So with that cleared up, we can begin, right? So let's start. Um, where here? Anyway, let's begin.
Everything that has a soul, I try to treat every single thing with respect.
But you're appropriating indigenous culture to
I am not
justify
appropriating
arbitrarily
indigenous culture. I'm
harming.
appreciating indigenous culture.
So this is going to be spicy, we can tell, right? So yeah.
Hey Q, nice to meet you. My name's Ed, and today I'm at the University of Dallas with a banner that says, "Why aren't you vegan yet?" You've been listening to a conversation I've just been having,
Yes.
and it seems like you have some questions or some ideas or thoughts. So let me know what you think.
So my first question for you is, what is your opinion on the native tribes, such as the Inuit, who live up in Alaska, who don't have easy access to these fresh produce that you're wanting them to eat, and instead rely on the animals they hunt?
Yeah, well, the issue of what we do to animals.
Isn't that interesting? Like Ed is sitting there in, I believe, in Dallas, Texas, which is like into the southern part of the United States of America, and this lady just brings up people in the northest part of the United States, living in completely different situations to justify her own behavior, her own consumption habits, right? That's very interesting, and that's not a uh, valid reason for her to be consuming these things, right? Obviously. Let's see how Ed responds.
Animals is an issue of necessity. This question of veganism comes down to the options and choices that we have. So there are obviously people in the world who don't have the availability or the access to be plant-based or to be vegan, who are maybe in tribes and in indigenous communities where they don't have the access that you and I have, where we live with the means that we have. And so as a consequence of that, the morality of that situation is very different because they hunt animals and eat animals out of necessity. But the point of me being here with the banner about why aren't you vegan yet is to draw on the fact that it's about you and I and the situation that we have and the means that we have, which is why it becomes a moral issue for us.
Okay, I do want to say something here. I know why Ed doesn't mention it. It's because Ed is trying to be like take her worldview in and then apply her worldview back to her. So I'm not going to blame Ed. He has been doing this for a very long time. Obviously, he knows what he's doing. Um, so yeah, but Ed says that people are in indigenous communities. I do want to stress that ethnicity is not a justification for harming, for consuming the flesh and secretions and eggs of non human animals. Uh, if your ethnicity is the cause of you being in a situation, right, such as in the northern parts of Alaska or something similar, then yeah, for sure. Then then it is the situation, as that says, that justifies your consumption, not your ethnicity, right? Your ethnicity is not a justifier for consuming these things. Non-white people, such as myself, such as indigenous North American people, such as like African people, such as East Asian people, and so on, we function in the same way as white people do. We are capable of the same critical thinking abilities, right? So it's not ethnicity that justifies this, it's the situation. But I do understand why Ed wouldn't mention it, because then she'd just get on, she'd just take the conversation elsewhere. So yeah, I think Ed is doing a good job so far. Let's continue.
I mean, you talk about, us like we are not part of these indigenous tribes. I mean, these indigenous tribes, yes, they live.
This lady is the whitest person I have seen like this entire week. And she's saying that she's telling Ed that he mentions indigenous communities as if they're not part of indigenous communities. Of course, you're not a part of indigenous communities, lady. You you're the whitest person I've seen all week, and Ed is British, right? Earthling Ed Winters is British. So obviously, neither of you belong to these indigenous communities that you are talking about. Uh, or even if you are, you certainly don't look that way. I don't know if you are, but it doesn't seem likely, right? Yeah, anyway, let's continue. As you can tell, this is probably going to be a long one because I'll be interjecting quite a lot, right? And yeah, so sit right in. Tell me how you're doing. Drop a few comments, and we can continue. Oh, and if you have a question, you can use the pinned comment to submit a question or to make a request, and I'll be responding to all the requests and questions that are submitted during the stream. Okay, let's continue.
Live, out remote away from, civilization, but many of them, they don't see veganism as like they don't want veganism because they.
What about you?
Okay, here's the thing. People people wait, what was the thing that she was saying? Hold on.
Veganism as like they don't see veganism as like they don't want veganism because they.
What about you?
Okay, here's the thing. So this lady's she says that indigenous people, they don't want veganism. But it's not indigenous people who don't want veganism. It is that 99% of the world, regardless of ethnicity, of geographical location, or whatever, do not want veganism, right? It's the general population in general doesn't want veganism. So obviously the effects of that are going to trickle down into various ethnicities that exist. It's not they don't want veganism. Indigenous communities don't want veganism for sure. But it's not because of their indigeneity, right? It's because they are humans. To say that indigenous people in particular don't want veganism, that they are in particular anti-vegan, that they particularly are incapable of recognizing the moral worth of animals is anti-indigenous. It is racist. I don't use this accusation lightly, right? But I do think when we do see racism, we have to call it that. And I don't think that this lady has malice in her heart. I don't think she thinks that she's being racist. I don't think she thinks that she's superior to indigenous people or anything like that. But she is accidentally, unintentionally, for sure, being racist.
I don't want to be vegan
And why don't you want to be vegan?
because one, I have I'm a neurotic, which means I'm very sensitive to certain things. So I already am, picky about what I eat. And so trying to find like a substitute for the nutrients that I need is very risky. So eating meat that I know, meat that I understand, it helps me that way. However,
Okay, I think that this, I feel like, so I've watched a certain part of this, right? I've watched until around this point, around the 5 minute mark of this. And I feel like this is and then I thought that I'm just going to make a live stream and watch the rest of it with you, all of you. I feel like this is going to be the only sort of honest reason that she's going to provide, that she's a picky eater, that she just is very picky about what she eats. I think this is the only honest one that she is going to give, because from what I can tell, she's just going to be making a lot of these sort of woke, pseudo progressive excuses to continue to eat meat, as she just did, and some of them are intentionally or unintentionally very racist. Let's continue.
With these indigenous tribes,
Okay, wait. How did we get back to
however,
indigenous tribes?
with these, Dan, it helps me that way. However, with these indigenous tribes, because you have to understand, veganism is very much a white colonized thought. It very
No, it's not. But it's so interesting. Um, she was she said that, okay, indigenous people don't want veganism, and I've explained why that is racist, right? And uh, and then Ed says, well, why don't you want to be vegan? And then she talks about why she doesn't want to be vegan, but then she's like, but indigenous people though. I mean, like, why is she? It's not about indigenous people in Alaska who don't have access to fresh foods. We're not talking about them. Ed is not sitting in northern Alaska in the Arctic Circle. He's not doing that, right? Ed is sitting in Dallas, Texas, having a conversation with this woman, but she's just taking the conversation there. I don't get it.
much is.
Well, people say that, but then also people
Such a white colonized thought. It very
Okay. Uh, she says that veganism is a white colonialist thought. It's not, and I do have something to say about it. But let's first see what Ed has to say to it, right? Let's get on with it.
much is.
Well, people say that, but then also people say that when you look at the roots of non-harming animals for diets, it's deep-rooted in places like Hindu cultures and Jainist cultures. And so the idea of abstaining from eating animals is very much deep-rooted in kind of like Buddhist, Hindu, and Jainist cultures, and not necessarily in a white colonialist process, at least.
Yes, but like in Hinduism, they don't eat cows. They believe cows are sacred, but they eat other meats.
Well, not many don't, and historically many haven't as well. So I'm just saying that it's not strictly true that this idea of non-harm to animals is a strictly white colonialist thought. So I don't know if that holds up historically speaking.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got a lot to unpack here. So she says that veganism is a white colonialist thought, and Ed's response to that is that many cultures, like Hindu cultures and Buddhist cultures and Jainist cultures, they they also have been there have been vegans amongst them. But I don't think that's a good response. I think this is the I haven't watched the whole thing, but so far I think Ed was doing very well. But I think this is where I think he gives a bad response, because Hinduism, as the lady points out, Hinduism doesn't entail not eating animals, and it certainly doesn't entail not consuming animal products, and neither does Jainist culture nor Buddhist culture. Um, because in Hinduism, so much Hinduism has an obsession. It has an obsession with dairy, right? So much of dairy is used in rituals, for foods that are prepared for the rituals, and for non-food purposes as well. But Jains too, they won't eat garlic and onions, but they will consume dairy products and so forth. And I think the same is with Buddhists, and I think some Buddhists will even eat meat. So I'll have to give this point to the lady here, but her point that veganism is a white colonialist thought, that can be refuted very easily using a separate example. So there is this poet, right, called Al-Mari, who is a uh, who is a Middle Eastern poet, right? Is an Arab poet, and he's considered one of the great classic Arabic poets. And he wrote this beautiful poem that I would like to share with all of you. Let me just. Mm. So Al-Mari, who is an Arabic poet, right, wrote this beautiful poem. Beautiful. He writes, "You are diseased in understanding and Almari writes, "You are diseased in understanding and relation. Come to me, that you may hear something of sound truth. Do not justify eating the fish the water has given up." So he mentions fish. Then he says, "And do not desire as food the flesh of slaughtered animals." There's meat. Right. Then he goes on, "Or the white milk of mothers who intended its pure draught for their young and not noble ladies." There's milk. Right. "And do not grieve the unsuspecting birds by taking eggs. Eggs. For injustice is the worst of crimes. And spare the honey, which the bee gets industrially from the flowers of fragrant plants." He even mentions honey. For, for they did not store it that it might belong to others, nor did they gather it for bounty and gifts. I washed my hand of all of this and wished that I had perceived my way before my hair went gray. So that is a beautiful, beautiful poem by an Arabic poem uh, who mentions fish, right? He mentions meat, he mentions milk, he mentions eggs, he even mentions honey. Something some people still seem to be confused on the subject of, right? So this is a very old poem, right? It's written by, again I'll say it, it's written by an Arabic poet called Al-Mari. You can Google it. And he this is like this was written in like 1000 CE, or one, I think it's 1000 CE, right? So it's like a more than 1,000-year-old poem, right? And so given that this poem exists, right, and it existed long before European colonialism of the rest of the world, why veganism cannot be a white colonialist thought as the lady is claiming it to be, right? So yeah. um Anyway, so Ed, I think, responded kind of poorly, but I think that's just what he mentioned over the top of his head. I wouldn't be too harsh on him, right? I get it, he must have been talking to a lot of people before this. So yeah. And before we proceed, I'd just like to remind you that if you have any requests or questions, please use the link in the pinned comment or a super chat. I'll be responding to everything. Let's continue.
On harm to animals is a strictly white colonialist thought. So I don't know if that holds up historically speaking.
Yeah, historically speaking, it's not. But this sudden boom of veganism is historically colonial. Do
What do
you
you mean by colonial in this context then?
I mean colonial as in the white colonizers, as in the Europeans coming colonizing half the world. I mean the Americans colonizing the West. There's a recent surge in, white liberals who believe they're doing good and who believe, such as, you and I. And I'm not saying vegan is bad. Veganism is not bad. If you want to be vegan, be vegan.
Yeah.
It's so interesting that she made that just snide personal remark at Ed, like, you're a white liberal who think you're doing good. But the irony of this thing is that she seems to be the white progressive or the white liberal who thinks that she is doing good by tokenizing the suffering of indigenous people for her own greed. She is the white liberal who thinks that she is doing good, but she is not, right? She's tokenizing the suffering of indigenous people. And she has the audacity to say that Ed is the one doing that. It's upside down, really.
Cool.
But when it comes to pressuring other people who don't want this and who have different beliefs. For instance, are you aware of the view of cosmocentrism?
No, you explain it to me.
So
This just sounds like something that is rubbish, right? Cosmocentrism. Let's find out what it is, because let's find out what it is.
For instance, are you aware of the view of cosmocentrism?
No, you explain it to me.
So cosmocentrism is a worldwide view believed by many of indigenous tribes in which everything is equal to each other. Me, you, the trees, the grass, the water, the rocks, the animals are all equal to each other. An animal.
Hold on. If if the lady is equal to air is equal to animals, then why does the lady only eat other animals and not human beings if she does take this cosmocentric worldview as she has named it? Because some people will say, oh, you vegans, you think that animals and humans are equal, and maybe some vegans do, maybe I do too. We'll get into that later, but this lady certainly does, right? And if she does believe that humans and non-human animals are all equal, then the logical extension of that is for her to be vegan, right? By the way, before we proceed, can you just let me know that whether or not the audio level on the video is on the same level as my audio? If not, I can reduce or increase it. Just let me know.
Animals hear us and they understand us. And so with many people, such as the not the Inuit tribe, there's another tribe in Alaska, starts with a K, I can't remember at the moment. They believe that the earth was made by the raven. Their god, to put it in terms, is a raven.
Yeah.
But they hunt elk and they hunt moose.
Yeah.
But they don't just hunt them, they respect the animal. They take everything from the animal and they thank the animal.
Yeah.
And they thank the animal in several ways. They don't talk about hunting moose. They just say, I'm going to go out. Because they know the moose hears them.
Okay, some of you are saying that the audio is too loud. I've reduced it now. Is it better now? Let me know, right?
That they say, I'm going to go hunt moose. The moose hears that and says, they are not worthy to have me.
Oh, okay.
They are not worthy to eat me. Yeah. And so it hides.
Because they presumably don't want to be killed if they're going to be alerted to that. But the point that I'm making...
That's a good response. That's a very good response. Yeah, the moose will go hide if the moose finds out that you're going to hunt the moose, right? Yeah.
Is that I'm not in those areas of the world talking to indigenous people in those areas. I'm talking to people here. And whilst we may make the argument that when we look at the rise of veganism as a popular cultural thing, it's kind of emerging from places in Europe, Australia, and the US. Actually, when you look at the growth rates of veganism in America, one of the...
Okay. Okay, so I don't know if this claim is true that veganism is booming in places like, maybe it is, it probably is, but we do need empirical evidence that it's booming from places like Europe, North America, Australia, right? But the thing is that is the case with all social justice movements, right? It is the case with gay rights, it is the case with women's rights, it is the case with every other social justice movement. And the reason for that is because these regions, right, are mostly made up of people who are not colonized, right? Mostly. And so the moral progress is possible because when a region has been sucked off its resources, right, moral progress becomes difficult. So uh, places like Europe, right, that did not have their resources sucked out of them, right, they are able to focus their attention on moral progress, while places like South Asia or Southeast Asia, they are more focused in rebuilding their the region so that they can at least have the most basic facilities. So that is the reason that most social justice movements first come up in these areas, and that is the reason that veganism is coming up first in these areas. It's not because veganism is a white colonialist thought, because if you're going to say that, then even gay rights is a white colonialist thought, which it obviously isn't. Before we proceed, we do have a donation from Faye, right? Who says, love how you think and speak. could you share your kaju burfi recipe sometime? Or maybe I could. So kaju burfi, for those of you who do not know, is a is an Indian sweet, and I just love it. And it's mostly vegan, but if you're going to buy it, you should ask the person who is selling it whether or not it is vegan, whether or not there are dairy products in it, because sometimes they will put in ghee, which is not vegan, which is a dairy product. So yeah, I love it. Maybe I'll share the recipe sometime. And thank you so much, Faye, who donated $5. Let's continue.
Places in Europe, Australia, and the US. Actually, when you look at the growth rates of veganism in America, one of the biggest demographics in terms of adopting veganism are African Americans. And so to make the claim that it's a strictly white colonialist thing doesn't hold up, especially as white vegans aren't going to indigenous communities in Alaska and aren't trying to impose that on them. You know, I'm here.
Yeah, that's another good point. Yeah, even though black people in the United States are not as privileged as white people, based on the data I've seen, they have lower income levels, right? Average income levels. They are still adopting veganism, right? So to say that veganism is a white colonialist thought, even in the current context, doesn't seem to hold up, right? So yeah.
Here in Dallas talking to people
Not
like yourself.
physically, but through social media, there has been a push of people saying, you know, Inuit tribes who hunt beluga whales, which are not endangered in any way. People are saying that's wrong. You can't do that, and they say that is our only source of nutrients.
But at the same time, what can be easy to do, especially when we have views about a certain group of people, is we can take people from that group who kind of maybe portray views that could be considered extremist or views that could be considered impractical, and we can use those to try and almost, caricature the whole movement itself. And so I'm not going to disagree that there are certain vegans who will make that claim, but by and large, most vegans, including myself, have a more of a nuanced understanding that there are people in the world who have a different relationship based on the environment that they live in, and hence I'm not going to make the claim that people who are hunting belugas out of necessity to survive should be held to the same moral standard that you and I can with the choices that we have. And that
Right. So you can see how incredibly experienced Earthling Ed is, right? He answered that so eloquently. But I would just like to add one more point: is that these people, these vegans who specifically go after indigenous people, indigenous North American people, or indigenous people from other parts of the world, these kinds of vegans, I think, primarily exist in the imaginations of non-vegans. They don't exist um, in the real world, not to a very significant amount anyway. So yeah, and and I think Ed is doing a great job here. You can tell he has a lot of experience.
that's what's important.
You say moral standard because you're saying
Kind of with the choices that we have, and that's what's important.
You say moral standard because you're saying that them hunting beluga is morally wrong.
No, I'm saying in a situation of necessity, it's different. Like with humans, if I said, shooting a human is morally wrong, it is. But if you have to shoot a human out of necessity, then it becomes morally justified. So I can say harming an animal is morally wrong, but if you have to harm the animal to survive, then it can become justified. So issues of morality are always nuanced based on the circumstances. But by and large, the general rule should be, if we can avoid causing unnecessary harm to someone, morally speaking, we should try to pursue that option.
Yeah, that is just so well explained. So well explained. And before we proceed, we have a super chat that I would like to respond to. By the way, I do appreciate all the donations you provide, whether it's by super chat, whether it's by the link in the description. But I would just like to say that when you donate to the link in the pinned comment, right, I get to keep more of the money because Streamlabs takes a smaller cut, right, than YouTube does. YouTube takes a 30% cut, while Streamlabs takes like a 5% cut. So thank you for the donations. I appreciate all the donations. It means so much to me. Okay, so here's the super chat. Let me read it out. who says from Vegan Tubers, who says all animals are indigenous to Earth and have personhood. Entitlement begets slavery. Veganism is the way to act friendly to extraterrestrials. Okay. So I would like to say that, yeah, all animals, you see, we have to remember that this earth is not just for humans, right? If you're going to say that people are indigenous, as I am an indigenous person to northeastern India, we must remember that the animals were here before my ancestors, right? They have been here for millions and hundreds of thousands of years, right? Their ancestors were here before my ancestors, basically, is what I'm trying to say. So, yeah, we do have to keep that in mind. So, if it is wrong to kill uh, indigenous, like if it is wrong to kill indigenous people like me, like no indigenous North American people, obviously, then it is also wrong to kill indigenous animals, right, or animals in general for that reason. So yeah, let's continue.
What do you think about that?
I mean, yeah, I fully agree.
Try to pursue that option. What do you think about that?
I mean, yeah, I fully agree. And so my question is just why are you here asking these people why we're not vegan? What is your reason for that?
Because it's a thing that we don't often think about. It's an idea that most of us don't kind of like consider when we're buying food. And most of us in society are against animals being unnecessarily harmed. And so morally speaking, we already agree that reducing suffering for animals is morally preferable. But when we go into a supermarket or onto an ordering app or whatever, and we buy food, we don't really think about the process of what we're supporting because, it's culturally normalized. We've been raised with that. And so the purpose of me being here isn't with this kind of naive opinion that everyone's going to sit down, agree with me and be like, hey, I'm going to be vegan now. But it's to try and like maybe ask questions and talk about topics that people maybe haven't considered and to try and get maybe a deeper reflection on those values and ideas, because it is a moral issue. And morally, we do agree with reducing suffering. It's just that we haven't always thought about the suffering that occurs for our food that we consume.
And this is so important, having conversations, right? Because conversation is our only way forward, right? That is how we make moral progress. So Ed is doing some great work, and and I realize I've said that a lot of time because I do admire Ed. But yeah, he's doing some great work, and I think I might do that too sometime in the future. Do you think? Okay, here's the question for the chat. Do you think I should go out to different parts of India and sit down in front of elite universities and try to have similar conversations? Would that be something that you'd be willing to watch? If so, let me know in the comments in the live chat right now. And let's proceed.
Okay, so I know because I was raised in the Texas education system.
Yeah.
I'm sure many people here were.
I'm sure.
We were all taught high school, like health class or whatever, how fast food was made, and they show us like the slaughter camps and all of that of the animals and whatnot, and they try to traumatize us and whatnot, and they're like, don't eat fast food, that's why you only eat real meat and whatever. But then they don't say that that exact same process happens for real meat. So one, that's a whole issue, but you have wanting.
Okay, this I think that's a good point. That's a good point from the lady, that regardless of whether you're eating a burger from McDonald's or whether you're eating real meat from uh, locally farmed, humane farm sort of, it's still an animal who dies. So she does seem to realize this. She does seem to know this, but she's not vegan, which is very interesting. Let's continue watching. And I just realized I hit the mic. And before we proceed, I have noted that a lot of you would indeed um, watch me going to elite universities in India and having these conversations, which is great. So I'll try to do that sometime soon in the coming year. I don't want to rush it, but yeah, I'll try to do that. Let's continue.
You have the plant-based produce, right? You have who are those? Who is growing this plant-based produce? It's immigrants who are undocumented, who are being paid cents a day they are being exploited on their own reason.
Yeah.
Yes, animals are being exploited and they're being harmed, but so are humans.
Yeah.
And so you saying that, what's, morally, overall better to have plant-based, that's also like, it's a gray area because you're also in, furthering harm on these people.
So we
Okay. What does she think that the animals whom she is eating eat? Because those animals are fed crops, right? They're fed crops that are grown by the same migrant workers, right? By the same underprivileged people, and that because animals, right, to raise an animal, right, to a certain sort of profitable size, and then to slaughter them takes far more grain than it would to eat the grains directly if grains were grown directly for human consumption, right? It takes up to 16 kilograms of grain to produce just 1 kilogram of beef. And beef is, I will admit that it is the most inefficient form of meat. But even for the most efficient form of meat, which is just a terrible, is just terrible, right? How we have to talk about animals, but the most efficient way of producing meat is to raise chickens, right? But even for chickens, you have to feed them about 9 calories worth of food so that you can steal 1 calorie from their corpse, right? So even in the most sort of efficient form of meat, it still takes a lot more crops to produce meat, right? And it always will, because energy cannot be created. It can only be transformed from one form to another. That's from my physics degree. Let's continue.
we have a very imperfect system, not just agriculturally speaking, but just generally speaking.
Yeah.
There is a huge amount of exploitation that happens in all different systems. And that's unfortunately a thing that needs to be challenged. So I will never say that veganism is perfect, that plant-based production is perfect. It isn't. What it is it's a reduction of harm. And the reason it's a reduction of harm is because everything you just described in terms of what's happening to humans happens in the animal farming industries as well. It's the same people growing the feeds for the animals. It's the same people working in the factory farms and undocumented migrants. And it's those people working in slaughterhouses. And slaughterhouse work has been shown to increase rates of PTSD, mental health problems, suicide, drug and alcohol abuse. So the situation of animal farming also causes intense human suffering, and in many ways the same, and also with an add-on of what happens in a slaughterhouse. So it's a reduction of suffering, but it doesn't mean we should stop there. We should challenge that, and what we need is a plant-based food system that takes out the animal suffering and challenges that suffering of humans as well, to create a fairer system for everyone.
I agree. Have you considered going about it perhaps the other way? Saying we need to focus on humans first. We need to focus on getting these undocumented immigrants, one, that, making them welcome in this country, giving them fair pay, giving them fair rights, all of these things, making them not fear being deported. Because then once you get their support, they'll be much more likely to help us in reducing the harming of animals.
Wait a minute. What does she mean, help us? What does she mean by that? Because she is not us here. She is not fighting for animal liberation, right? Um, so it's she talks about us versus them. It's kind of a very mild sort of white savior complex that she has here. But but the thing is that what Ed is doing here and what vegan activists do is they're not going around asking people to be activists. They're asking people to not cause harm, and to say and this is quite analogous to saying, British colonialism 200 years ago, it harmed Indians for sure, but it also harmed um right British colonialism, it harmed Indians, right? And a lot of people, lower class British people, depended on the exploits from India for their livelihood. So wouldn't it be a little silly, for example, for someone then to have said, well, you're trying to end the colonialism in India, have you tried going about it the other way? First get these people first get these lower class British people another job, and then you try to end the colonialism in India. But the thing is, you can do both at the same time. And similarly, even in here, right, you can do both. You can help the animals by not killing them, right, and you can create a fairer system for everyone, which is what Ed is saying. Also, Ed makes a brilliant point about slaughterhouse work, right? While there is human suffering in growing plant-based food and animal-based food both, animal-based food has this additional kind of human suffering, which is slaughterhouse work, right? Which is just unparalleled by any kind of uh, uh, like human labor in plant-based agriculture. And slaughterhouse work causes PTSD. It forms causes a very particular type of PTSD, which is PITS, PITS, which is perpetrator-induced traumatic stress. So yeah, that's another brilliant point that Ed just made there. And on top of that, there is of course the trillions and trillions of animals who are dying. So even if human suffering were equal in both cases, which it is not, but even if they were equal, right? Even then, it would not be justified to eat animals, because human suffering would be equal, but there would be far more animal suffering. But here, human suffering is already more in one case, and there is animal suffering on top of that. Let's continue. I've rambled on for quite a while. Yeah.
Be able to help us say to go on strike against these slaughter facilities. You know, it's all about how you go about things. Yes,
we can do both at the same time, though, is the argument I'd make. But we can tackle this animal exploitation and the human animal exploitation at the same time and create a system which is growing plants which is best for animals and takes into consideration the rights these humans deserve, so that we create a fairer system for everyone.
In a perfect world, we can go about it at the same time. This is not a perfect world, and that it would be an incredibly difficult thing to do. And so
it's incredibly difficult, whatever. So we might as well try to do that. And the first thing we can do is abstain from the animal products. And then with our time, if this is something like you yourself clearly care about and for a righteous and just reason, we can take out the animals and then campaign to create accountability for farmers to make sure that they're treating humans right. Of course, it's going to be a challenge, but it's a challenge whichever route we take. So let's take the route that gets us to where we want to be for the benefit of everyone.
I mean, either way, you're going for the benefit of everyone. That way is just your worldview. You're wanting to help the animals first and then humans second.
We can do both of them.
No. Because in one way, you're actively causing harm to one group while helping the other. And in Ed's way, right, the way vegans want is to not harm the animals and help the humans. Obviously, one of these ways is better because humans are being helped in both ways. But in one of the ways, the animals is not being harmed. And that way is veganism.
At the same time.
Yes, but you are deliberately going animals first, slaughterhouses, then to the agricultural plants. It doesn't matter if you're also helping humans in that slaughterhouses, your main focus is those animals, is it not?
My main focus is to create a better agricultural system for everyone, and veganism is that, because veganism isn't just about consuming plants. It's about creating a system that reduces exploitation, and that's not just to non-human animals. So as a vegan, I wouldn't be, if we had a situation where it was just plant-based agriculture, but everything you're describing still exists, well, as vegans, I would hope, and I certainly would as a vegan, think, well, this isn't where we want to be. So I'm not saying that it's a just animals. I'm saying it's about humans as well. But we shouldn't just say, hey, let's try and help the humans in slaughterhouses, but not help the animals in slaughterhouses, when we can help animals and humans in slaughterhouses by not paying for it, and animals in slaughterhouses as well.
There, because I messed up a little.
But we shouldn't just say, hey, let's try and help the humans in slaughter. I would hope, and I certainly would as a vegan, think, well, this isn't where we want to be. So I'm not saying that it's about just animals. I'm saying it's about humans as well. But we shouldn't just say, hey, let's try and help the humans in slaughterhouses, but not help the animals in slaughterhouses, when we can help animals and humans in slaughterhouses by not paying for it, and then help those workers.
Plant-based products from those type of companies? Do you know those companies that do that? Are you avoiding that, or are you still buying from those companies?
Well, the supply chain is murky.
Okay. Okay, were you able to hear the audio while I was doing all of this? Because if not, then let me rewind. Just let me know if you're able to hear the audio while only my screen was up. Okay.
Vegan, a system that reduces, because my main focus is to create a better agricultural system for everyone, and veganism is that. Because veganism isn't just about consuming plants; it's about creating a system that reduces exploitation, and that's not just to non-human animals. So, as a vegan, I wouldn't be if we had a situation where it was just plant-based agriculture, but everything you're describing still exists. So, as transhuman
products from those companies.
Well, the supply chain is murky, isn't it? And so
Okay. So the interesting bit here is that she thinks that this is a point in her favor when it is in fact a point in the favor of veganism, right? Um, but it's a point in the favor of veganism because it highlights how easy veganism is, how easy it is to uh, how easy it is to abstain from animal products, right? But it's very difficult, and you can tell it from the way she was framing that question. Do you do that though? Do you do that though? It had that tone, right? And she knows this is difficult, and that is exactly why we should be vegan instead of trying to figure out which companies do what, right? Because that's incredibly difficult, and she knows this, and that's why she asked that sort of gotcha question. Let's see how Ed responds.
Do that? Are you avoiding that, or are you still buying from those companies?
Well, the supply chain is murky, isn't it? And so I can't sit here and say honestly that I don't pay for that to happen, because I can't honestly say that. But that doesn't mean that I agree with it. And if I had the choice in front of me in a supermarket to say, hey, this comes from here and this comes from here, if I had that choice, I would buy that. But we don't have that choice yet because the supply chains are so, ubiquitously bad.
Yeah,
so we need to challenge that as well.
Meat-based products. There are companies that do that, but there are also companies that don't. There are organically grown.
But they still cause harm. They still end up in the same slaughterhouses. They're still killed in the same way.
No. I'm talking about those that are like very local, very.
Yeah, I know.
They kill animals again in a humane way. Again, the idea is that.
But what does
Isn't it interesting? Because in the beginning, if you remember, this lady she talked about how fast foods and sort of these kinds of meat, they were produced in the same way. She talks about that, right? She said it's the same thing. But now she's talking about humane farms. How do you humanely kill someone unnecessarily who doesn't want to die? I don't know. Let's see what Ed has to say.
humane meaning? When we say humane,
if you kill them in a humane way where they don't feel pain, in a halal way, right? They don't feel pain, where they are cooked a certain way, right? They don't have any added stuff, any non.
What is halal? How do they kill animals halal?
They kill them without pain.
How describe the process?
I could not tell you specifically because I'm not Muslim.
But you can.
So she is talking about things she does not know about. Let's hear the entire thing she has to say before cutting her off.
Tell me that they die without pain, but you can't tell me how that goes.
Yes, because I have Muslim friends and I ask them, I'm like, what does halal mean? They say basically they're killed in a very specific way where they, as less pain as possible.
Can I tell you?
So she did not inquire further. Someone told him that this way of killing makes someone not feel pain, and she just accepted that. Like, where is your critical thinking here? Right? You're not thinking about this matter clearly at all. Right? And yeah, like someone told her that this method kills someone in a way that does not in a way that they do not feel pain, and she just believes it. Oh my god. But I do know what halal means, right? As I think Ed knows too. Let's continue watching.
Tell you how they're killed
in a very specific way where they, as less pain as possible.
Can I tell you how they're killed? They have their throats cut, but they're not rendered unconscious. So they're conscious and they have their throats cut.
Is that how they're killed in the halal way?
Yeah. Kosher and halal. That's what it means.
But okay, so
you can tell that she was just very uncomfortable with that process of how it is described. But up until this point in her life, she had just accepted it to be true without even questioning it. And this, I think, is such a problem with the world, where people will hear something, and as long as it comes from a sort of marginalized community, people will just accept whatever. And yeah, it's kind of sad, really. And I don't know. And yeah, let's continue.
Again, that's all about anatomy,
Do
and
you think that that sounds compassionate?
it's more compassionate than other ways of killing them.
It is, but is it more compassionate than not killing them?
They're gonna. The base of the problem is, if you have respect to the animal, right?
Can you respectfully cut their throat for an unnecessary
Yes.
reason? You
That's what Indigenous people do. Indigenous people hunt in a respectful way.
But people who buy meat from slaughterhouses when
People
they don't have
buy
to.
from slaughterhouses, no. But again, if you go from organically sourced, small, very small companies, their meat is expensive because they are so small. But
They're still killed in the same way, though. They may be raised slightly different, but they're still killed in the same way. The standards still apply. Halal, kosher, or even just the USDA, humane regulations. It's the same in all slaughterhouses.
yeah, but yeah.
Okay, for those of you who do not know, kosher, as far as I know, is the sort of proper Jewish way of killing an animal. And both halal and kosher are not really better ways of killing animals. And many people, I think, would consider them worse. And the reason for that is very simple, because halal and kosher, these are methods of killing non-human animals that are based off of ancient texts written by people who knew basically nothing about the world, right? Religious scripture was written by people who knew less of the world than a fifth grader knows today, right? um so I don't know why you would expect that to be like some grand revelation, because it's not. I know why Ed doesn't say that out loud, because he's obviously trying to take her view and just apply her worldview back to her. Like, it's a consistency thing. He's not going to contradict what she believes. um but yeah. And this is obviously from experience, but yeah, since I am not sitting there in front of her, I do think that I have the liberty to point out the absolute ridiculousness of basing your beliefs on these ancient scriptures. Yeah. Anyway, let's continue. And if you want to ask a question or submit a request, I'm taking requests today. Then you can do so by submitting a question through the link in the pinned comment or by a super chat. Although, if you do submit a question through the link in the pinned comment, I do get to keep more of the money. YouTube takes a very big cut. So, yeah, let's continue.
So they're raised in the same way. They still are able to have a better life. They're able to go out in the pastures and they're able to live life as a cow.
But they're still killed in a slaughterhouse.
But you can kill them. I'm saying you can kill them in the cosmocentric worldview. You can kill them in a respectful way where you thank the animal, where you.
Does that help the animal? Does us thanking the animal
In a
help the
cosmocentric
fact?
worldview, yes, it does.
But would you?
Oh my god. If okay, in the beginning, she defined a cosmocentric worldview as as a worldview that in which everything is equal to one another. Everything is equal to one another. And like animals, like she is equal to Ed is equal to non-human animals. How on earth, in that worldview, is killing someone justified if everyone is equal? I don't get it. Like, I don't personally take that worldview, but if you do, I think the obvious implication of such a worldview is to be vegan.
Would it not be better just to eat the plant? Us thanking the animal
in a
help the
cosmocentric
fact?
worldview, yes, it does.
But
Okay, here's a question for all of you. I want to know your opinion. Um, so yeah. some people say that humanely raising an animal, although bad, humanely raising an animal and then killing them, although bad, is still better than raising an animal in a factory farm, where caging them into small pens and so forth. But there is an argument that is being made by some people who say that killing an animal who had a sort of great life is even worse, because then you're ending a positive experience. So humanely raising and killing an animal seems to be worse than killing an animal who was raised in a factory farm, because in the case of the factory farmed animal, you're just putting them out of their misery. But in this case, in the humanely farmed case, you're ending a positive experience. So which do you think is worse? It's an interesting question, really, and I would love to know your opinion on this subject. Let's continue.
Would it not be better just to eat the plants?
No, because
Morally, there's no
world has
difference.
to remain balanced. So if
There's
you
no balance in animal farming. Animal farming destroys balance. It destroys the environment. We're artificially breeding animals into existence. We're selectively breeding them, giving them hormones, and then we're killing them in slaughterhouses. But we're talking about slaughterhouses right now.
I'm not talking about slaughter. I'm talking about locally grown ranches,
Which
right?
still go to the same slaughterhouses.
They do not go to the same slaughterhouses, my dude.
They do. They may be raised differently, but they're killed in the same ways. They're killed in the same methods with the same techniques.
They're killed in the same ways, but they do not go to slaughterhouses. They stay at the ranch. These are their own meat suppliers. They grow and kill their own meat.
They may have local slaughterhouses, but it doesn't matter. They're killed in the exact same way. They may not go to some of the big industrial Smithfield slaughterhouses, but they're still killed in the same way. And for that individual animal, the experience that they endure is the same, because the method and the action is still the same.
The action is still the same, but it's, again, least pain as possible. So they're cutting the throat at the right place where the cow, honestly, just falls unconscious. They don't feel
They bleed out. And
how can someone who is a university student actually believe such a thing? It's so ridiculous, and I don't know. I can't believe that she actually believes that, right? Let's continue. But like, imagine, yeah, I don't know how she can believe that, but let's continue.
are we saying that is it compassionate to unnecessarily kill someone else? Is that compassionate?
Someone else. No, it's an animal.
But we're animals too.
Okay, this is interesting. This is very interesting, because earlier she says that she holds a cosmocentric worldview in which she is equal to Ed, is equal to non-human animals, is equal to rock, is equal to everyone. So, but now she is taking a now she's taking offense and at Ed saying that an animal is someone. I don't know. Just pointing out the hypocrisy here, just pointing out the inconsistency.
We are animals too, but we are different from animals in that we have an animal.
But we're animals too.
We are animals too, but we are different from animals in that we have conscious thought.
So do they. They're conscious. And if they're not a someone, what are they? A something?
They are something that, see, that I'm trying to explain the cosmos, like with cosmocentric worldview and with animism, right? Again, something indigenous people, most indigenous tribes believe in. There is a difference, right? You know, we have to understand that the indigenous people, they were doing this before us.
But I'm not so interested in indigenous people. I'm not interested in people in those scenarios. I'm just talking about the everyday person.
It doesn't have to be in their scenarios. I myself am trying to follow the cosmocentric worldview. And so I only try to buy meat products that were sourcely grown, raised, and slaughtered here, right?
So, how like, because again, Ed, I said this earlier, right? Ed knows this. It's about the situation. It's about the situation. And Ed talks about the situation, and then she is not in that situation. She is not in that ethnicity. She is not fulfilling any of those criteria, even if you accepted that ethnicity matters in justifying animal abuse, which it doesn't. She has neither, and she is just using their suffering for her own greed, which is, I think, quite ridiculous, to be honest.
So I know that they living their full life. They were not stuck in 2x2 pens or whatever, but they were still respected, right?
But they don't live their full life. They're killed, cows can live to 20, 25. They're killed at 12 to 24 months. And respect is a mutual thing. When you sat down with me, we've had a respectful conversation because we've listened, we've engaged with each other. We haven't shouted over each other, we haven't cursed, we haven't been nasty, and that's respectful because it's a mutual. I'm trying to understand your thoughts and your feelings, and I feel like you're reciprocating and doing the same for me. But what we do to animals isn't respectful because it's a non-consensual thing. We force them into these environments for something that we want.
Not necessarily non-consensual. Again, with the cosmocentric worldview, the moose will gladly give himself up to the hunter.
Does the cow gladly walk into the slaughterhouse and present their throat?
You can tell that this lady has never seen an animal being killed. Never. No animal will gladly give up their life to the hunter. This is just such a deluded worldview, right? Because again, people say that about cultures like mine within India, right? People will say indigenous people in India, right? Indigenous tribal people in India respectfully kill animals and they thank the animal, and the animal gives up their life to them, and the indigenous people thank the animal, and so on. These kinds of arguments are also made about people like me within India, and that's not true. I've seen how people of any ethnicity are killing animals, and the animal struggles, right? The animals struggle for their life. They try to get away, they try to run away, right? No animal will give up their life ever, right? Yeah.
Out.
Himself up to the hunter.
Does the cow gladly walk into the slaughterhouse and present their throat?
No, technically no, but a cow is different from a moose in that they are domestic,
sure,
right?
But they're still sentient. They still have feelings. So domesticate just means that we've kind of given them certain traits to make them more passive, so we can find.
Wait a minute. This lady is okay. She admits that a cow is different from a moose, and even if her whole worldview, we accept that a moose is different from a cow in any morally significant way, she is almost most probably not eating moose, right? Or meese, whatever. I think moose. So yeah, but so she says that cows don't go and give up their life, but she is probably eating cows, right? So I don't know. Her entire worldview seems very, very confused, as it seems to me.
Farm them, but they're still inherently the sentient, conscious beings, just like the moose and the elks and other animals in the wild.
Yes, but it's hard to explain if I don't have my notes with me. But there is that nuanced difference that many indigenous tribes have followed. You have, for instance, the Comanche tribes, right, who hunted buffalo or the bison. They hunted them. Some could argue in an inhumane way. They would chase them off cliffs. They would kill them.
Chasing someone off a cliff is humane. Are you being serious right now? Would you like place yourself in these in the shoes of the animals, sort of in the hooves of the animals? Would you like to be chased off a cliff? That is so. I can't believe someone actually believes this.
They would feel harm, but they still thanked the animal. They still took everything from that animal. If we took everything from the cow and put it to use instead of just taking the meat and throwing the rest away,
we don't. We boil the bones down, turn it into gelatin. We do use everything. We use blood and make it into different things. So we do use everything from the animal. But that issue of respect, again, I think you can do something more respectfully when you have to, which these indigenous tribes, they have to. But for most people in society, they're paying for animals to be put into a slaughterhouse when they don't have to. And these things are being done to these animals, and it's not consensual. They don't willfully walk there. So it's an unnecessary action that doesn't need to take place by the virtue of it being unnecessary. And we have an option that reduces that harm that we can cause. And that's the primary argument I'm trying to make, that we have a choice. We have choice. And when people have choice, that's when these issues become moral issues.
Would it be different if I were to say, grow my own chickens and kill my own chickens and eat them?
No, because we're still killing them. We're still taking their life from them when we don't have to. So whilst that system may be preferable for the chickens up until the point that they're killed, that point still has to arrive. And that point is when it becomes an immoral thing because you're needlessly taking their life from them.
I'm not needlessly taking their life. I got to eat.
You don't have to eat them.
You have to eat, right? Just as you don't have to eat me, you don't have to eat Ed, you don't have to eat the chickens, right? You have to eat, you need to get your nutrients. So the thing is, you need protein, not meat, right? You need omega-3, not fish. You need calcium, not milk, and so forth, right? And all of these nutrients, right, you can get from plants who are not sentient beings, right? So do that.
That can be argued, right?
Well, no. For most people, it can't be. That's the point. For most people, it can't be, and that's the point I'm making. For most people, they don't have to cut the throat of the chicken. They could just eat something else instead.
Yeah, okay, if you don't want to eat meat, don't eat meat, all right? That's the fair thing. But you trying to, you say broaden the horizons of these people, but really you're wanting to make them feel guilty for consuming these meat products.
No, I'm not trying to make anyone feel guilty. I'm just having a conversation where I'm asking people why they're not vegan and trying to establish their views on it. I'm not trying to make you feel guilty. I'm just trying to ask questions and respond to your questions that are authentic to my feelings and in a way that potentially allows us to reach some commonality, which I think is important here. So I'm not trying to make you feel guilty, but interestingly, guilt is an emotion which comes from the sense of morals. If we feel guilty about something, it comes from the sense of there's something to feel guilty about. If I pick up a rock and throw the rock on the floor, I don't feel guilty. If I pick up a piglet and throw a piglet on the floor, I do, because I recognize that action is causing harm, and that's why I feel guilty. So guilt can often be a powerful emotion in helping us determine how we view something when it comes to that being right or wrong.
Last thought before I go to class. You're talking about picking up the rock, throwing it on the ground. Indigenous people see that rock as a soul. It has a soul,
sure.
Right? And so they also will not pick up a rock and throw it on the ground.
So she has a problem with throwing rocks on the floor. She has a problem with throwing rocks on the floor, but she has no problem with pigs being killed, chickens being killed, and so forth, right? Again, even if you think they are equal, right? Even if you think they are equal, which is just ridiculous, even if you think that, why are you then okay with like smashing a pig on the floor, which is a standard practice, which is done, by the way. If a pig is not growing to a profitable size fast enough, then the butcher or whatever, the farmer, I don't even want to call them farmers, they will take the pig and they will smash the head of the pig on the floor and kill the piglet, right? So she has a problem. She doesn't have a problem with that, but she has a problem with someone throwing a rock on the floor.
I'm not saying that I would do that, but I'm just saying that I would feel less guilty because I recognize that action causes less harm. And the feeling of guilt that you have comes from the concept that there's a notion of harm being inflicted.
So what I would encourage you to do is to look into cosmocentric worldview and to look into how these indigenous people have lived their lives thousands of years before we have come to them, and recognize how they were able to hunt, but in a way that's a community. They bring the community together in a way that honors the animal, in a way that even with the cow, the domestic cow, they do it in a way that honors the animal. Even if they're being killed or not, the animal is giving up its life for us.
The animal is not giving up their life for you. Why would they? It makes no sense.
Thankful for that animal for giving us its nutrients.
Indigenous people that have to hunt to survive, I have no bones with. I'm accepting that people have to do that to live. So like I've said, and just want to say right again at the end, the situation I'm describing is not the situation I'm here to oppose.
No.
I'm asking people at this university in Dallas why they are vegan. Because they're not an Indigenous person in Alaska who has to hunt to survive. They're a person who is paying for an animal to be unnecessarily killed.
It's not about, what I was describing then can be here at UTD Dallas. That's what I personally try to do. I see everything that has a soul. I try to treat every single thing with respect.
But you're appropriating Indigenous culture to justify arbitrarily harming.
I'm appreciating Indigenous culture.
But going into a supermarket and buying a piece of steak has nothing to do with that, because they're going through a whole process that's predicated on their survival, whereas us, we're not doing that. So going into a supermarket and buying a steak is nothing like what they're doing. The only thing is an animal has died. But in that situation, it's justified. But in this situation, it isn't.
I gotta get plus.
Okay. All right. Thanks so much, Q. Have a great day.
This last bit is so interesting.
Has died. But in that situation, it's justified. But in this situation, it isn't.
I gotta get plus.
Okay. All right. Thanks so much, Q. Have a great day.
Isn't it interesting how Ed sort of greets her and like wishes her goodbye and says have a nice day and all of that, and then she just leaves? Like if she were winning the debate, right? If she were sort of winning the argument, if she thought that she was getting her point across, she wouldn't leave like that. Um, and I bet that she'd be willing to miss class if that's what she wanted to do. But yeah, she she left rather abruptly, and it really sums up the entire debate that they had, doesn't it? Because yeah, it really sums up the entire debate that they had, where Ed is being all nice and polite, but the lady is just being incredibly rude and like doesn't talk properly and so forth. And that's why she left like that. Um, And today, I had a very long nap in the afternoon. And for that reason, we're going to carry this on. I have created a playlist, and we're going to watch some more videos. Let's continue. Oh, by the way, before we proceed, I would like to sort of make a request, really, because I'm streaming from my sister's laptop right now. My laptop, if you saw the recent community post, it has broken down and it keeps crashing, right? And so I have to use my sister's laptop for doing the stream. So if you could kindly support the stream, that would mean so much to me, right? Like because the repair is going to cost something, right? It's going to cost a few thousand rupees. Right. So if you could help me out with that, that would mean so much to me. They said that they have to replace the motherboard and so forth. So again, if you want to help me out, that would be greatly appreciated. Please use the link in the pinned comment, and thank you so much in advance. And you can submit questions, you can make requests, and so on. Um, Someone just said that Cosmic Skeptic dropped a new video. So, chat, which video should we watch? Should we watch Cosmic Skeptic's new video, um, or should we watch another Earthling Ed video? Let's decide together. What do you think? Uh, hmm. Okay. Okay. While we're deciding that, let's continue to another
Potentially more
Earthling
time.
Ed video.
I don't.
But if you'd like to watch, if you'd like me to watch the Cosmic Skeptic video, let's do that too. Like whatever the chat decides, right? Um. So someone asked, if the repair is going to cost a few thousand rupees, and if that's Trash Carcass asked, that's Stacy. A few thousand rupees is a lot, for me at least. 1,000 rupees, I think, is like $20, and it's going to cost like I think like near 10,000 rupees. I'm not sure, but like you don't have to donate the whole amount. Obviously, any little amount helps. So yeah, let's continue watching Ed because most of you seem to want to watch Ed. Let's continue.
Really want to eat.
Want.
Yeah, want,
Different.
of course, want. But in order to fulfill, my caloric needs, I don't want to eat
Want.
the same dry beans.
You don't have to eat the same dry beans.
I mean,
You're
okay.
creating an extreme scenario to try and justify this. You don't have to do that. Hey, nice to meet you. My name's Ed. Today we're at USC. And as you know, I have a banner here. And the banner says, "Why aren't you vegan yet?" You've been waiting. You kindly sat down. What is your response to that question?
Okay, so someone said, Stacy. Stacy said that she was joking. Okay, I'm really like, I don't seem to be able to realize when someone makes it, when someone is kidding. And so yeah. So thank you for clearing that up, Stacy. I didn't realize that. So yeah, let's continue. And someone made a super chat donation. Thank you so much, BG Rune One. Means a lot. $5. Um, there was another tip. Whoa, there are so many tips. Thank you so much. So let me, before we proceed with the video, let me just read out the donations, right? Because it really does mean so much to me. So Copper has tipped $20. Thank you so much. Um, Faye has donated again. Um, Faye says, how do you answer arguments against veganism where it is many ridiculous things rolled into one and they do not let you separate them? Like it is no single trait but a combination of traits. Though I see. Um, So I think a very generic response, like I'll have to know like the specific argument that someone is making, but I think one very generic response to non-vegan arguments is saying, "What did the animals ever do to you?" And it works with like this indigenous people the argument, like someone say, "Oh, European colonizers did this and this and this, therefore therefore veganism is bad." You can just respond by saying, "Well, what did the animals ever do to you? What did the animals ever do to you? Why are you punishing them for the crimes of European colonizers and so forth?" um yeah, I think that's a very basic generic response, especially to the woke arguments against veganism. And I just realized that I have so many donations and I can't thank you enough. Means so much to me. So let me read them out again. um Faye, I think I read. Okay, let me just make sure that I'm not missing out anyone. So I read, thanked Copper, thank you again. Faye asked the question, I answered it. BG Rune donated $5. Thank you. Urgem donated $11.84. Who says, "Thank you, Aditya, for your content. Hope you can get the laptop running soon." Thank you so much. Means a lot. Um, Ian the Pig donated $20 for the animals and the laptop. Thank you so much. NAK donated $40 and says, "Get yourself a nice computer, my boy." Thank you. Thank you so much. It means a lot. Trash Carcass has super chatted $5. Thank you. Thank you so much. Means a lot. This will cover such a significant amount of the repair costs, and I can't. And I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful. Thank you. Thank you. So let's proceed with the video, right? Let's proceed.
I think there's a lot of different ways.
Kindly sat down. What is your response to that question?
I think there's a lot of different ways to look at the whole vegan argument.
Sure.
For starters, I think that there are sustainable ways to eat meat.
Okay.
Now, you'll never find me supporting or condoning factory farming,
Yeah.
or clear cutting Brazilian forests to grow feed.
Sure.
But I think that if you're sustainably hunting, say, deer in a German forest or in a forest here in the United States, considering that deer are already overpopulated, I think that's a sustainable way to produce meat. On top of that, I think that, especially like, look at where we live in South Central LA, we really
Okay, here's the thing that sustainability is not a metric for morality, right? Sustainability does not tell you what is moral, because David Rams made this point to me once, where uh, where he tells me that like the most sustainable thing to do is to for you to go out with a gun and just shoot people, right? and and that would be incredibly sustainable because humans are so detrimental to the environment, right? And yeah, and he's correct, right? That would be indeed very sustainable, but that is not moral. which is the point that David made to me. And I think that's a great analogy. That's a great point to respond to someone when they make this claim, right? And before we proceed, I would like to read out the donations that I have received further. I need to be able to keep track of these because, yeah, there are so many. Thank you. So Lele has tipped $5.7 and says, "Thank you for everything you do for the animals. Thank you so much. It means a lot." Kalena, the boy, has donated $15 and says, "Best wishes from Hawaii." Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you from India. Um, the next donation is from Piano R Peggy 0S. Has super chatted 8.99 euros. Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. Um, I'm going to try to pronounce this correctly. Vegan Cat Croissant has donated $3 via Streamlabs. And thank you so much. Let's proceed. And before we proceed, I'd just like to say something that if you're going to make a donation, right? Every single donation is very much appreciated. But I would like you to know that when you make a donation via the link in the pinned comment, I do get to keep more of the money, right? YouTube takes a very large cut, right? It takes 30%, and I still really appreciate the donation. But if you want me to keep more of the money, like donating via the link in the pinned comment that allows me to do that. But if you don't have access to that, or if you don't trust that, then donating via super chat is very much appreciated. Let's continue.
We live in a food island here, so I think it's sort of an actually, like, look at where we live in South Central LA. We really live in a food island here, so I think it's sort of an not entitled, but sort of an elitist stance to say that it's immoral to be vegan, or to not be vegan, because I look at the supermarket where I shop and I look at what I can eat if I were to be vegan and what I can eat as a meat eater, and how I can just fulfill sort of my daily dietary requirements. And it's difficult and expensive, right, to substitute and to find the right substitutes to be nutritionally healthy as a non-vegan.
So some plant-based alternatives
Wait,
are
what did he say? It is expensive to be to fulfill your nutritional requirements as a non-vegan. Okay, that's
right substitutes to be nutritionally healthy as a non-vegan.
So some
okay, well, he's right there, right? If you're just like, if you're comparing like basic vegan food to basic non-vegan food, right? The non-vegan food costs more, right? So he's right there. Yeah, let's proceed. But I think he misspoke, and that I think that was a slip of tongue, sort of.
Some plant-based alternatives are undeniably more expensive than their meat counterparts. Of course, that can't be denied. That comes down to a few issues: supply and demand issues. Also, the subsidization of meat inherently pulls the price down. So there are a couple of socioeconomic factors that can be a part of that. But the point still remains that some plant-based alternatives are more expensive. But there are also a whole host of plant foods that are relatively inexpensive. So when you look at things like whole grains, legumes, chickpeas, so peas in general, lentils, those kind of foods, they can actually be very inexpensive compared and can actually bring the price down. So it varies on what you're purchasing, definitely. The point about the deer is an interesting point, because from an isolated perspective, obviously, let's separate morality and sustainability. Of course, we separate those two things. So from a sustainability perspective, of course, one person going out into the Bavarian forests of Germany, or indeed the forests of Connecticut here in the US, for example, and shooting one deer does not have a broad, impact on the environment. However, the issue then becomes, if we're deeming that to be a sustainable form of meat production, it's only a sustainable form of meat acquirement because hardly anyone does it. If we removed factory farming and tried to fulfill people's desire for meat from hunting, we quickly realize that 30 million deer versus 350 million US citizens has a sustainability issue as well. So
Okay, that's a very good point, and I had never heard someone phrase it like that. But I would like to offer another point here, is that when like like hunting, people say hunting is sustainable, but it's not. It's far less sustainable than factory farming. And again, sustainability is not a metric of morality. But because look at this, factory farming exists not because people are just evil people just wanting to do just as much harm as possible. No, people just want to maximize the output from the lowest amount of input, right? They want to increase the difference between these two so as to get maximum profit. Factory farming is the best way to do that, right? So factory farming is indeed the most sustainable way of producing meat, and that too is unsustainable. And even if it were sustainable as a whole, it would still be unethical for the reasons that I had explained. Right, let's proceed.
When we talk about sustainable food systems, those sustainable food systems are food systems that work to feed the masses,
Yes.
which obviously hunting wouldn't be able to do.
No, I do agree with you, but you asked me why am I not a vegan?
Right.
And I was telling you why I'm not a vegan.
Yeah.
Do I believe in veganism as a concept? I mean, I think it's one of the ways that we can be more sustainable as a society for sure.
Right.
But you asked me why am I not a vegan, and that was my answer.
And so you only eat a deer hunted in the US.
And so no, I don't. But I'm saying morally, that's what if I had the I'm not a vegan because I don't have the means to be a vegan.
Right.
At the end of the day, right? I have not the time to sit down and cook my legumes.
But you
right?
have the time to cook the meat and the dairy and the eggs.
I don't really cook meat. I eat whatever's available. I don't really have the time to cook for myself, right? It's terrible. I agree. It's unsustainable. If I had the time, I would definitely eat more sustainably, right? I mean, I'm from Tanzania originally,
Tanzania, nice.
right? And so I can tell you there, the way I eat is sustainable, and I do eat meat, right? Because we have a neighbor who's a cow farmer, right? I see these cows every day. I see how they live.
Sure.
I see the carbon footprint. I see how they're killed.
There's firstly a kind of a consideration I have to apply to this, which is, when we talk about sustainability, the issue becomes less about veganism and more about like the environmental impact. What I mean by that is veganism is beneficial for the environment, but as a philosophy, it's not about the planet. You're not in Tanzania, you're in LA.
Yeah.
And so from that perspective, you're not consuming the food that you say is justifiable to consume.
Yes.
So from that perspective, how do you justify consuming the food that you're consuming here in LA away from the cow farmer in Tanzania?
I'm hungry and I'm a broke college student, and that's the easiest way for me to get the protein that I need.
Okay, so hungry. Okay, well, you can eat other foods as
Of course.
yeah.
But it's the most convenient, cheap, and effective way for me to get the protein that I need at the end of the day. And I realize that's like a very self-centered argument, right? And I understand the implications, and I know there's a million different rebuttals that you could make to that comment. But at the end of the day, like that's the reality for so many Americans. And so until that changes, and there are more vegan, subsidies and ways for us to be vegan more conveniently, it's just not going to change.
Okay. Where do you get your food from then, if you don't mind me asking? Because you say you don't really cook food.
I mean, I cook a bit.
Okay.
But I eat whatever. I mean, like sometimes it'll be Postmates, and if I do get Postmates, I'll try and eat something sustainable. Sometimes it'll be, just whatever's open, whatever's close by. I have a supermarket right next to my house.
And in that,
Like if you're doing that, just order the vegan thing, right? It's not very difficult. And yeah, just do that. I don't get what's so difficult. Like you go to the restaurant or whatever wherever you're eating from, and then you sort of get you order the vegan thing instead of ordering the chicken. You order the chickpeas, and so on. And before we proceed, we have another donation that I'd like to read out. Eric has donated $10.8, and he says, I'm assuming, or they say, that glad to support your channel. Hope this helps. Of course, that helps. Thank you so much. Means a lot.
in that super. And, okay, so
In that
when you go into
supermarket,
Postmates, you have options.
Yeah, of course.
When you go into the supermarket, you have options. So from a convenience perspective, it's no less inconvenient or convenient for you to go into the supermarket and buy something else, or go into Postmates and type in vegan and get a delivery from Veggie Grill or somewhere else, as opposed to where you do it.
So listen, if I'm eating Postmates, I will try and eat a salad, right? Like that is something that I do try and stick to. And if I walk into a supermarket, I will try not to buy the beef, right? Because I know beef, especially beef that we eat in the US, by far the worst environmentally and sustainably, right?
It is, yeah.
But
Okay. I think Ed has made this point repeatedly that it's not about sustainability, right? It's not about sustainability. But this dude is just going off about what is sustainable and what is not, right? And like something can be sustainable and still unethical, right? Like killing someone can be ethical. Similarly, killing, like, you can have sustainable meat, maybe, like, even if you could, like, practically it's not possible, but even if you could, right, that would still not be automatically ethical. And another interesting thing about what he said is that he tries not to buy the beef. Like if you're trying not to buy the beef, like what's in there to try? Like if you don't want to buy the beef, don't buy the beef. What's in there to try? Is someone for taking your hand and just putting you to, like, take this beef right now? I don't imagine someone's doing that, right? So I don't know what he means by that. Let's continue.
Will I eat chicken? Yes, because at the end of the day, when it comes to cooking my chicken, right, legumes, cooking legumes takes hours. Like,
No, if you buy tinned legumes, it takes
okay,
seconds,
no, I can
minutes.
buy tin legumes, but have you had tin legumes, especially in this country?
Oh, yeah, I have.
They
They're all right.
kinda-
Chickpeas are nice.
Man, come on, they kind of taste like shit. Yeah,
Not true.
Um, so okay, here's the honest bit, right? He knows he can afford chickpeas, but he won't buy them because they taste like shit, according to him. Um, so yeah, what he's doing is his justification is not the sustainability thing, all of these things, all of the it's an elitist thing. No, none of these woke things. Basically, it boils down to what tastes good for him. And some people have made this point to me, which is an interesting point, that the taste of of animal products is mostly from the plant-based seasoning. And anyone who cooks, like anyone who has cooked, really knows that the taste mostly comes from the seasoning, right? Try to eat an unseasoned piece of meat and you'll realize how bad that tastes, right? Yeah.
maybe that's just a matter of preference, but I'm. It's much more. How do I word this? Sitting down and cooking a little bit of chicken on my pan, right?
Yeah.
Searing up some chicken and then eating it
Yeah.
is far more wholesome for me, right? First of all, the protein that I get
Yeah.
is significant. The time that it takes is significantly less, and it tastes so much better than that tin of legumes that I'd go and buy for $2 from Smart and Final and sit down and eat.
Yeah.
Like, maybe it's a difference in taste preferences, but I think that's also, I think this is kind of a dead end argument, you know.
Oh,
So ultimately, stated, this is ultimately about his taste preference, right? It's not about these. This video is titled like veganism is an elitist stance, which is what the claim that he made. It's not about that. It's about taste. Ultimately, it all points down to that, right? Whether or not this guy likes to admit it or not, right? On the point of taste, I'm going to eat some tasty vegan chocolate now. But let's proceed.
I don't think it is, because your foundation for consuming animal products was determined by a few factors. Firstly, convenience, but it's no more or less convenient for you to buy something else in the supermarket and cook it. It was then down to cooking time, but of course, the time it takes to sear a chicken and cook it thoroughly so you don't get ill from salmonella and E. coli is the exact same amount of time, or potentially more time, than it would be to cook some chickpeas, some frozen vegetables, add some soy sauce to that, maybe a packet of Uncle Ben's rice or something. It's pretty much the same time. And when you look at the price, a price for a packet of chicken breasts is going to be higher than it is for a tin of chickpeas and a bag of frozen vegetables and some, big bag of rice.
So listen, you asked me why am I not a vegan?
So he can do all of these things that Ed is describing, right? And that would perfectly suffice, but he won't do that. And let's find out why he won't do that.
Vegan,
Yes,
right?
it did, yeah.
And I told you why I'm not a vegan when I'm not in this setting,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And I've had, I'd much rather fixate on that side of my argument
Yeah.
than on when I'm in LA, because when I'm in LA, I'm not operating the way I would like to.
But when you're
Right.
in LA, you're making choices. So, of course, there are going to be different parts in your
You are
life
making
where
choices, but you're constrained by so many more factors here.
in LA, where you have supermarkets and you have an abundance of options that most people in the world don't even have. LA is one of the best and
Yes,
easiest
I
places to
would
have
say
that
yes.
choice.
I would say yes. Have you been to Smart and Final, which is a supermarket?
That's wait a minute. That is such a good point, right? Because this guy is in LA where he has so many options. Um, like take my example, for example. I am in northeastern India. Um, People don't even know what tofu is in this part of the country, right? But at least in the town where I am, I go out, ask people for tofu. Like the first time I asked someone for tofu here, they were like, "Excuse me, what is that?" I'm translating, of course. They don't know what that is, right? I had to explain it to them. They had no clue. They had never heard of it, right? So even the most basic vegan food, tofu, you can't get it here. And I'm still vegan and all that jazz, right? So if I can be vegan living in this small town in northeastern India, this dude certainly can be vegan and sitting in LA, right? I'm getting a few notifications uh, about donations, but I'm not seeing them here. So let me try this. Try to refresh this. But let's continue. I'll get back to the donations soon. Let's continue.
Where I shop.
Yes, and I've been in a variety of different supermarkets, and they all have the plant-based foods. You're not going to the supermarket and only finding chicken breast. So the point I'm trying to make is the arguments that you made initially to justify not being vegan and are not justifiable enough to negate the consequence of that consumption. You know, the even the sustainability impact, but more importantly, the moral impact of that.
Well, you see, I think the moral impact, I don't think there's really moral implications to eating a chicken. I've killed chicken. I would kill a chicken and eat it with no problem, right?
Sure.
That's
I like how he responds to that, like as if whether or not he has a problem, whether or not you have a moral issue with something, is not a measure of whether or not something is moral, right? It's not. It's simply not. And the thing is, um, yeah. So, for example, some people like we have like, consider in the case of crimes against humans, right? Some people have absolutely no problem with committing crimes against human beings, right? Committing immoral things against human beings. But that doesn't mean that those immoral things now become justified, right? They don't, right? So this guy might not have a problem with killing chickens, just as some people do not have a problem with killing humans, but that doesn't make either of these things moral, right? I don't know why he's making that point. It's a silly point, to be honest.
not my issue. I think you're basing a lot of what's so wrong with eating chicken on the moral side of it.
I think that is the biggest issue.
And-
Sustainability-wise, it's a big issue, of course,
Yeah, and
but
I
it's
would love
beyond
to talk
that.
about the moral. So
too.
why are you so morally opposed to the eating of other animals?
Because the animals that we consume are sentient. So they have capacities, certain capacities. The capacity to feel, so the capacity to experience suffering, pain, but also pleasure and happiness. And they're individuals. And importantly, what we do to them is unnecessary. So obviously, in a time of necessity or in cultures where there is necessity, tribes perhaps, or areas of the world where the accessibility isn't what it is here, that becomes a different issue, because in the times of necessity you can justify different things. But in the absence of necessity, which where we are in the situations that you and I are in, there is an absence of necessity when it comes to eating animal products. The consideration that animals deserve based on things like sentience, the capacity to experience and suffer, outweigh the convenience, let's say, of us wanting to consume their flesh, or the enjoyment that we get from consuming their flesh.
That's a very good response, and it's as good a response as you can get. Before we proceed, I'd like to read out a donation. I'm not seeing it on the dashboard here for some reason, but I can see that some of you have donated. So I'd just like to thank you. I can't see your message yet. Maybe it will show up soon. But Camila has donated $20. Thank you so much, Camila. I can't see your message yet. I'll read it out when it shows up here. Um, Eric has donated 15 Canadian dollars. Thank you so much, Eric. Means a lot. Um, and let's continue. Or were these sent privately? I'm not sure actually. I think this might have been sent privately. In which case I messed up. But thank you so much. Means a lot. I did not read out your full name, so that should be okay.
That's what I think it comes down to.
I'm sorry, just to better understand your argument, what's the basis for how you like weigh one versus the other? I mean, obviously you're human, who are all intrinsically selfish beings. Like, how do you weigh the suffering of a chicken versus how much you want to eat the meat? Like, can I ask how you sort of draw that comparison?
I asked
To better understand the grounds.
Of course you may. So I asked myself the question, first and foremost, what do I think has higher value, taste or their life? Now, for me, obviously, in the position I'm in, I believe that their life has higher value than the taste I get from them. But back in the day when I used to eat animals and I would say taste, I had to think, well, what does that actually mean? And that meant that I'm valuing sensory pleasure as a moral justifier. If I acknowledge that animals deserve moral consideration and therefore what we do to them is a moral issue, but the reason that I'm doing what I do to them is because I enjoy how they taste, I'm saying that my sensory pleasure morally is a moral justifier. And I don't believe that that is the case. What do you think?
Are you familiar with this idea of moral relativism?
I am familiar.
And I realize this is sort of a problematic route to take, and you can point to Germany in the 40s and all that.
Maybe so.
Going down that route. But I think that is definitely something that one can consider.
I mean, he knows the problem with moral relativism, but he's still making it. Like consider the case of moral relativism. Moral relativism is basically like there is no objective moral standard by which you judge things, basically, and things are relative, right? What is moral in what is moral to one culture is not what is immoral to one culture is not immoral to another. That is more accurately called cultural relativism, I think. But if you're going to do that, you're going to have to point to things like FGM, female genital mutilation, and say, well, we can't really object to that because moral relativism, though. But yeah, I don't think that's a good route to go down, and he knows this too, right? Yeah. Let's continue.
As a society, we've come to accept it. And I think that as a society, we determine what's morally right and what's morally wrong.
As a society, yes.
As a society, as a whole.
What a society believes to be morally right and wrong changes and evolves over time. 1940s Germany is a good example.
I know. I gave you that example.
I would have thought of it anyway. There's a multitude of different examples, and so moral relativism is an interesting philosophical position. But in the real, tangible world where our decisions have consequences, we don't actually live by the philosophy of moral relativism.
No, we don't. I just wanted to throw that out there because I think that is, at the end of the day, if you went around this school and asked people why they do eat meat and why they don't think that way, even if they don't know what moral relativism was per se, that would be the argument that they made, right, in one capacity or another, because everyone else does it. But I think
but like, it's not right. This guy knows it's a bad argument, so why are you making it? Basically, he's trying to throw everything and then like just sticks and see if it sticks, right? Basically a last ditch effort to argue for like veganism, for arguing against veganism. By the way, before we proceed, I think some of you have seen the text on my t-shirt a little bit. I'd like to just show it to you, and I'd like to get your opinion on it. How is my t-shirt? Wait, let me show it to you. Whoops. Oh, yep. Do you like my t-shirt? Do you like my t-shirt? How is it? Let me know. Where is it? Whoops. Okay, let's continue.
At the end of the day, when you weigh your own needs versus the life of another sentient being, it's impossible to make the comparison, right? Because you're the only one who experiences your own like, how do I word this properly? You're the only one who experiences your own experience.
Absolutely.
Right? And so at the end of the day, it's very easy for you to weigh your needs over that of someone else. And it just becomes this completely subjective sort of roundabout argument that, do I value the life of another human over a meal? Of course. Do I value the life of a chicken over my meal? Perhaps. We don't know, right? And so
But the thing, well, okay, wait. He's talking about needs. Let me just take this back a little bit.
it's very easy for you to weigh your needs over that of someone else.
Thing is, it's not needs, right? Eating an animal is not a need, right? It is a want, maybe. It's not a need.
And it just becomes this completely subjective sort of roundabout argument that, do I value the life of another other human over a meal? Of course. Do I value the life of a chicken over my meal? Perhaps. We don't know, right? And so I think you end up going in this circle that is not, that you can't come out of, because I say, well, I value, the taste of my food over the life of the chicken, and you're going to say, no, I value the life of the chicken over the taste of my food, right? And we're going to go in circles for hours, because I don't know.
Yes, on that line, but there's another way of potentially going about this. The first thing is, you're saying the needs. Firstly, it's not the life of the chicken versus the needs. It's our wants, because it's not a need. So when we phrase it that way, it becomes maybe a little bit more easier to discern what the black and white should be, because it's about their life versus our wants. But I think the way that we can maybe break through this potential barrier that we could have is to try and
You know what? I need to rush back from the washroom, so I'll be right back. Let me put up a screen here. Um, wait. Share screen. Okay, I will be right back. Please stay here, because I've been drinking a lot of water, as you're able to see. Right, I'll be right back. And I'm back. I should be good for another hour and a half at least, and so we can continue. Stop share screen. Share screen. Chrome tab. And we're back. We're good to go. Thank you so much, everyone, for staying here. Means a lot. Let's continue. Let's continue.
understand what your morals around animals are. Is it that you don't think animals deserve moral consideration and that's why it's fine? Or do you think that animals do deserve some moral consideration? And I guess if they do, what moral consideration do they deserve?
Yeah, no, of course. I think that's a difficult question, because you go, would you eat a horse? And I go, no. And I say, would you eat a cow? And I go, yes. Right. And so we end up kind of going in circles there, because what's the difference between a cow and a horse? It all ties back to moral relativism, right? As a society,
which isn't a good moral framework.
We've sort of come to the agreement. It's not a good moral framework, but that's what everyone's argument eventually goes back to, right?
It can do
for many people.
But whilst the discrepancies or the arbitrary lines that we may draw up between species point to a certain hypocrisy.
Like, this, I think, is like, what people do is not automatically the right thing to do, right? People can do lots of things, right? But that doesn't make those things justifiable, right? uh like 200 years ago, everyone's argument for racism would be the same thing, right? But that doesn't justify racism, right? We're asking you, like Ed is asking you, what is the justification for you doing these things? And well, he's just like, well, everyone does it, but that's no justification, right? Let's continue.
In our view of animals, I think potentially there's another way of getting there. And that would be to try and discern whether or not reducing animal suffering we should consider to be a moral priority. Should we pursue the reduction of animal suffering?
Okay, can I ask you a question? And this is
Did you
just
come back to my question afterwards?
I will come back to your question, of course. But you know, I've spoken to other vegans, you know, kids in my class, whatever, and you know, they've compared. They think that animal suffering is one of our world's greatest issues, right? I mean, I've heard people compare it to some of the, you know, humanity's greatest atrocities, and they say that, you know, the mass slaughter of millions of animals every day is a travesty. And my question is, do you agree? Do you think that that as a moral dilemma is comparable to some of our society's greatest atrocities, or would you say that there is also a distinction, right? Because what you're saying is that we really need to take into consideration the suffering of these animals, right? And so my question is, how would you compare what's taking place now in this mass animal suffering with mass human suffering? Would you say that this is as great or a greater atrocity than, I don't know, you know, the killing fields of Laos or whatever it was? I mean, do you think that there's a comparison to be drawn, or do you also consider it an animal life to be worth less than a human life? Because how many chickens are dying and suffering? You know, how many people suffered in the killing fields of Laos? Way more chickens are suffering, right? And so if you consider that sentient being to be worth as much as a human being and a human's life, then you'd think that what's taking place right now is just as bad or worse than what took place then. So I think you also, deep down,
straw manning.
Sorry, no, I'm not trying to strongman, but I think perhaps you.
So this is a straw man, as Ed pointed out, but for sure. But this is also a red herring. Whether or not like a human life is more valuable than a chicken life, whether or not they're equal, whatever. The point remains that their life is more important than our taste pleasure. It's probably far more important than that, but at least we can agree on that. But he's making a red herring here, and it's interesting because he's making a whole like a comparison from this to a genocide or a tremendous human suffering, and he's using that as a gotcha against a vegan. Right? Basically, he's trying to get Ed to say the wrong thing. I haven't watched this debate before. I watched like the first 5 minutes of it and added it to the playlist. But yeah, I'd like to see how Ed responds because I don't know how I would respond in that scenario. Let's find out how Ed would.
You also, you know, think that the life of a chicken is worth less. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Well, even if we did reach that conclusion, and my views on this are, I'm not. And I'm definitely going to bring it back to the question I asked originally.
Yeah,
but I don't compare moral atrocities because I think that each moral atrocity is a moral atrocity within its own right. You know, what happened in Germany in the 1940s compared to what happened in the US during the genocide of Native Americans, the slavery of black people, of course, they all exist as their own moral atrocities in their own right. Now, the problem is if we want to quantify moral atrocities simply based on the numbers, well, then we would say, well, one of those atrocities was worse than the other because one of those atrocities caused more suffering.
Yeah.
But in effect, what that does is it sounds like we're devaluing the other atrocities. So it's not necessarily relevant to determine which moral atrocity causes much suffering, but just to acknowledge that each moral atrocity in and of itself is a moral atrocity and is something that should be addressed and challenged and changed. So, but then even if we do come to the conclusion that, and this might be a conclusion that you draw yourself, that in a situation...
This is actually a worldview, a view that I can respect. Because if someone is going to say things like, you know, the Holocaust was worse than what happened in India, which I don't agree with, right? I also wouldn't say it the other way around. But if you're going to say something like that, then sure, you are committed to the view that what happens to animals is far worse than what happened to humans in the past. But if for someone like Ed, who does not even compare to human atrocities, I think he's perfectly justified to say that, you know, he doesn't draw comparisons between human suffering and animal suffering. Yeah, I think that's a respectable view, I think.
situation where there's a burning building and you can save the life of a human or the life of a chicken, there are many ways why you would morally justify saving the life of the human over the chicken. So in an extreme situation, you might value the human life over the chicken's life. But the question then becomes, that's not the situation we're in. The situation isn't a burning building where it's one or the other. It's just a normal society where it's human, chicken, or neither. And that's why the neither comes into play. So even if you do value a human life more than the chicken in those scenarios, it doesn't mean that you're justified just to kill the chicken normally. Which brings me back to the question.
That's a great answer.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Very well put.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I mean, I've said it before probably, but I really appreciate you saying that. So to bring back to the question that I asked before, should we, when we're looking at issues of moral consideration in animals, is the reduction of suffering something that we should prioritize when it comes to our treatment of animals?
You see, this is a difficult question to answer because if
Ah,
I say
it's a difficult question to answer because if he answers it honestly, then he will have to change his actions. But let's see what he does.
no, right, and I say we shouldn't minimize and try and decrease the suffering of animals, I mean, that's like killing Nemo, right? That's that's a morally terrible thing to say.
Right.
And so obviously, yes, I do think we should. That's why I'm opposed to factory farming, because I think throughout the life of that animal, they should live the best possible life, right? I think a cow should grow up in a pasture and not in a cage, right? But I think when it comes time to kill that cow and eat it and put an end to its life, I think there's nothing morally wrong with that, as long as the life that it led was decent, right? Because at the end of the day, I think we both think animals should suffer less throughout the course of their life. Right? I mean, we both come to that agreement. I just think you can kill them prematurely and eat them, and you don't.
Right. And so this is where it becomes really interesting, because what we both agree on, and most people do seem to agree at this point, that factory farming is morally wrong. Okay.
Okay, this is so interesting because according to the statistics that I have seen, right, 95% of the meat in the United States comes from factory farms. But everybody seems to say like that they are opposed to factory farms, that they buy from locally, like which isn't justified either. But everyone seems to say that they only buy local. But if that is the case, then how is it that 95% of the meat comes from factory farms? It doesn't add up. Doesn't add up. Let's continue. By the way, if you have more questions or you want to help me out in getting this in getting the laptop repaired, which is sitting right there, you can donate via the link in the pinned comment or via super chat. I'm taking requests today, so you can request me to like submit requests or ask a question. Yeah, and let's continue.
We agree on that. And so then what happens, I suppose, is we come down this line, and at some point we split off. Okay, but the point is, if the aspiration from a moral perspective is to reduce suffering, whilst we may say that there are systems of farming that involve less suffering than factory farming, the question isn't, is this better than that? The question is this alternative the best alternative? Does it reduce the suffering the most that we possibly can? And if the objective is to reduce suffering, then that's why a system that still causes suffering isn't the baseline, if we can go further than the baseline. And remember that even those animals who are raised in those farms, the fact that they have a nice life and they're enjoying their life and find pleasure from it means that when we take their life, we're depriving them of more pleasure. Because at some point we go to an animal who's living a nice life, we say that's enough happiness for you. You've reached your fill of happiness. Now you can go to the slaughterhouse. But each day they're not slaughtered is another day where they'd experience more happiness, which is a further reduction of the suffering.
Is a quick death suffering?
Okay, so that becomes an interesting question. No, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's moral, because whilst suffering is an important aspect of the conversation, it's not the only aspect of the conversation. Well, first, let's use a human context. I could go up to a human, shoot them in the head, and they wouldn't suffer, but it wouldn't be a moral thing because you're depriving them of their life, and it's a non-consensual thing. Same with a dog. I could shoot a dog in the head, but we wouldn't say that was moral because for the same criteria. So whilst you could theoretically kill an animal in a way that doesn't cause them suffering, it wouldn't mean it's moral because you're depriving them of their existence and, of their life, basically.
Okay, I do have something to add here, right? Like animals, like human or non-human, right? They they have certain basic goals, right? Like implied goals, right? That they want to live, that they want to have happiness, that they want to feel pleasure, and so forth. When you kill someone, you're denying them those basic goals. And yeah, so that is it, right? And that's why killing someone, even if you do it painlessly, it's not moral, right?
I hear what you're saying. Like I said, born and raised in Tanzania.
Yeah.
Very limited options in a supermarket, right? Very few vegan alternatives, very few ways to effectively source your proteins, vitamins, minerals, etc. The things that you get from eating meat, right? Would you also sit down and have this conversation with someone in Tanzania who had no other means to, fulfill his dietary and nutritious needs? Or is this something that's only limited to sort of the wealthier world?
It's a really good question. And the answer is, if I was talking to a person, or I was going to a culture or a tribe or an indigenous group of people who relied on it for survival, I would not have this conversation. This conversation stems from the fact that we have the choice and we have the capacity to.
This is something that I just love about Ed. Oops. This is just something I love about Ed, because he does not have that soft bigotry of low expectations where he just judges people. What he does instead is he he talks about circumstances, right? He talks about needs regardless of ethnicity, regardless of like their ethnicity, yeah. And that is the basis on which he says that, this is justified or this is not justified. Yeah, and this is just what I love about Ed. Let's continue.
To do something else, but in the absence of that choice, it becomes a lot less of a conversation that we could have. So we've kind of spoken about systems that you would find moral. I like to think that maybe we've reached some commonality on the morality of those systems, and maybe an understanding that reducing suffering is preferable even in those environments where it could be worse. Okay, great. Bearing in mind that when you go into the supermarket, you go into the products you're buying and the Postmates that you're purchasing are supporting systems that we have, kind of both deemed to be wrong and immoral. From this point onwards, will you choose and will you opt for plant-based options, considering that we've reached commonality on much of the morality of this, and the system that you're supporting we have both agreed is immoral?
Now listen, I've always been in support of plant-based options, right? When I had the choice. So we came to an agreement that at some point it's too much of a sacrifice to eat a plant-based diet.
But you and I are way over the line.
Okay, yeah, we're way over the line, but we've come to a point, right, that where it's too much of a sacrifice. So I think for me, I've shifted the line a little bit.
Conveniently, maybe.
Conveniently, perhaps, maybe for the sake of debate, but I've shifted the line a little bit. When it's convenient, right, and I know convenient is very different in Los Angeles to a village somewhere in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
Big difference in convenience, but when it is convenient, I always have and I always will try and eat the most sustainable diet.
Which you can now.
Which I can in certain circumstances, but
Like the circumstance you're in now.
But you see this is the fundamental disconnect, is that I don't really want to eat.
Want.
Yeah, want of course, but in order to fulfill my caloric needs, I don't want to eat the same dry beans.
You don't have to eat the same dry beans.
I mean,
you're creating an extreme scenario to try and justify this. You don't have to do that.
Isn't that all debate is? You create extreme scenarios to justify stances. No, listen, I do. We've reached commonality for sure, right? We both agree that at the end of the day, we are trying to reduce suffering. Right. We're in agreement, and when it is convenient, I think I always have and I will continue to pursue a plant-based diet, right? When I'm back home, I will pursue the diet which has the least amount of suffering, right? And so I think at the end of the day, that's a win.
Okay. A win. And so, okay. So on that regard then, if we agree that we should pursue a diet that causes the least amount of suffering, do we acknowledge that a plant-based diet or a vegan lifestyle is indeed that diet that causes the least amount of suffering?
Sure. There you go.
Thank you very much. A pleasure speaking to you.
Really good.
Have a wonderful day.
Wow, that's amazing, isn't it? Like, I hope that I'm able to talk to people in this manner someday. right? That would be amazing. Um, yeah, that's amazing, right? How Ed was able to do that. And that he has convinced someone who is starting off with saying that veganism is an elitist stance, and then at the end has gotten them to say that uh, veganism is indeed the most like the diet that causes the least suffering. Okay, before we proceed, and I do want to go on further because I had such a long nap in the afternoon, right? And so yeah, I would continue. But before we proceed, I'd like to read another donation that I've received, and I'm not sure like are these being sent like privately via my email ID, like PayPal username, because I'm not seeing them show up on the dashboard here. But in any case, I would just like to read it out. Natasha Resnick has sent $25. That's such a huge donation, and it means so much to me. I can't thank you enough. Yeah, thank you so much. And Natasha says thank you, Natasha. It means so much to me. I can't thank you enough for this, really. Um, So like some of you are asking about the time it is here. It is 12:35 a.m. But I would like to go on. Should we watch Cosmic Skeptics video? I want to watch that and react to that. Let's watch that, right? Or would you rather I watch another Earthling Ed debate? It's up to you, chat. Let's watch the Cosmic Skeptic debate, yeah? Cosmic Skeptic video, yeah? Cosmic Skeptic. Let's go. Here is the Cosmic Skeptic video. Yeah. Okay. Here it is. Okay, here's a disclaimer. This video contains footage of animal abuse, which means that my video is going to get demonetized too. But since so many of you have donated so much, I don't really have to worry about that. Thank you. But anyway, yeah, here's a disclaimer anyway, and for those of you who might be sensitive uh, to that. I understand it. I'm sensitive to it too. Yeah, let's carry on.
I don't know much about football. There are few things I understand less in this world, in fact, than the sheer depth of raw passion that game seems to evoke from my fellow countrymen. It's just something I've never quite been able to join in with. I remember being in a pub when England lost the Euro finals and having to suppress a mild compulsion within me to stare in incredulity at the many grown men surrounding me who were actually crying real tears because the team they support failed to kick a ball into a net. At that moment, I realized there must simply exist an unbridgeable divide between our interests. But this, of course, goes.
Alex, I guess there is a difference between me and him as well here because I really do love football and like India never makes it to the Euros. Sorry, to the World Cup. Of course, you can't make it to the Euros, but India never makes it to the World Cup, and I would just be so happy if India did. But yeah, Alex seems to be very different. He is very um, academic, I suppose. But yeah, let's. He's very academic, bit nerdy, I suppose. And I don't mean that in a sort of derogatory way. I do respect him a lot. But yeah, let's continue.
Goes both ways. Those men probably think that our interests. But this, of course, goes both ways. Those men probably think that my passions are equally strange and care equally little for them. But it turns out that I was wrong, because this week saw a rare coming together of the interests of football fans and animal rights advocates like myself. What could possibly have happened to connect these two seemingly unrelated areas of interest? Well, the credit for this union goes to Kurt Zouma, a centre-back for West Ham United. Why? Well, this week, footage emerged of Zouma drop kicking his pet cat across his kitchen and slapping that same cat across the face so hard that the cat flies out of the hands of the child who was holding it. This was, to say the least, a bad move. The UK is known for claiming to be a nation of animal lovers, and Zouma has therefore received widespread condemnation from comedians.
I know what I'm going to do. End my career in England, where we literally worship animals more than humans, by kicking a fucking cat in the head.
From mainstream.
Don't you love the hypocrisy of these people? Just the sheer hypocrisy. I like how Alex says that the UK claims to be a nation of animal lovers, and he doesn't say that it is a nation of animal lovers because we'll soon, because we all know it already. But let's find out what Alex has to say.
Mainstream news.
I think this footballer is a disgrace. I think the RSPCA and the police should be looking into a criminal prosecution.
And even from the UK Parliament.
I'm sure the Leader of the House will share the widespread condemnation of the animal cruelty displayed by the West Ham footballer Zouma.
A petition to have Zouma legally prosecuted for his actions has reached 300,000 signatures. Now, astonishingly, Zouma was still chosen to play in a match after the footage emerged, and the fans of his own club voiced their discontent by booing every time he was on the ball, chanting, "He plays for centre-back, he kicks his fucking cat." And when Zouma was knocked down with an injury, they shouted, "That's how your cat feels." For what it's worth, the RSPCA has since confirmed that it has confiscated the cat from Zouma and is taking care of the cat themselves. Why was everybody so upset?
I wonder if these people who were like booing Kurt Zouma and like just condemning him, like whether or not they contribute to animal suffering. Most of them probably do, let's be honest. But yeah, let's continue. The cognitive dissonance is just unbelievable, truly unbelievable. Let's continue.
Well, it's obvious, because nothing can possibly excuse inflicting such unnecessary harm upon an innocent animal for such a trivial reason as finding it funny. You can see where I'm going with this, can't you? What Zouma did to his cat was indefensible, and people are right to condemn him for his abuse. But here's a plain fact that simply needs to be considered. Painful as that cat's experience was, an incalculably higher amount of suffering was inflicted upon equally innocent, equally intelligent creatures in the production of most people's breakfast this morning.
And I like how he mentions the innocence part. And you see, the thing is, when vegans talk about innocent animals, right, it's not an appeal to emotion as we are sometimes accused of, right? It is rather, in fact, it's related, right? But if you punish, if you harm a guilty individual, that is different from harming a innocent individual, and that's why it needs to be stated that these animals were equally innocent and equally sentient.
I want to tell you a story about the treatment of animals on UK factory farms. These are the farms that supply almost all of the animal products that are consumed in this country. That's bacon, steak, and chicken, but also eggs and dairy. And for the sake of brevity, I'll just stick to pigs. On UK farms, pigs are forcibly impregnated to give birth to piglets who have their teeth yanked out and their tails cut off without
Oh, Jesus. Okay. So you know what? I have decided that I might not watch this entire thing because, yeah. Can you hear me now? Yeah. Okay. So I've decided to not watch this thing, maybe because like it's so cruel. And like the interesting thing about me is, I suppose that some people do not know, is that I have never watched a pro-vegan documentary because I just cannot tolerate footage of animal suffering right? That's just how I am. I've not watched Dominion. I've not watched Earthlings or any of that stuff. So I don't really want to watch this because I feel like Alex is going to show us a lot more of these. So let's switch back to Ed, right? Yeah. How does the chat feel about that? Let me know. And while you're doing that, also let me know how you're doing. How are all of you? Yeah, I thought so. Let's just watch Earthling Ed stuff. Let's watch this debate. Okay, which one should we watch next? Because I'm here a long time. I can go on till the morning. So you can pick. Here's one. This is one, two. We've already watched these. Here are the rest. Okay. This is let's number them. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I think this is also something that causes a lot of has a lot of footage of animal suffering. So let's not do that. Which one should we watch next? 3, 4, or 5? I've never watched this Earthling Ed speech, which is one of his most watched videos. Let's watch, but it's difficult to react to those things, right? Let's watch this debate, right? I think that's interesting.
We farm is eventually killed in a. Every animal who we farm
Someone
is
said
eventually
4.
killed in a slaughterhouse.
Um, yeah, this is the one I had picked anyway, right?
We farm is eventually killed in a slaughterhouse. Does that constitute cruelty in your eyes or not?
That definitely constitutes cruelty. I'm going vegan.
Oh wow.
Hi, ID.
Okay, so that was the coming up section, right? And like we can see that at the end, this guy goes vegan, which is amazing, right? So let's watch this. We know it ends well. So yeah, let's watch this. Again, if you have any questions for me, you can submit them via the link in the pinned comment, right? And I'll answer them for you. So yeah, please do. It really helps out so much, and yeah, if you want to, but yeah, let's continue with this.
My name's Ed. It's a pleasure to meet you. Thank you so much for sitting down with me. I have a banner and it says, "Why aren't you vegan yet?" So, why aren't you vegan yet?
I just enjoy trying a variety of food, and I feel like being vegan would take away a large variety and a lot of options for me. Yeah.
Does the enjoyment of a food justify what happens to produce the food?
Definitely not. I don't think the practices in America are definitely like out of pocket 100%. I'm not pro any of that. I'm just, if the animals were taken care of.
Can you describe what that would be? Obviously, it's a not particularly unique thing to be against factory farming. I think most people are, because it is objectively really horrible. But what about, like you said, good practices, or like maybe taken care of well? What would that look like?
I would say, like, if animals were raised with care. I mean, like, the factory farming is obviously terrible. So
okay, before we proceed with, I'd just like to comment on one thing. He said that he is not pro any of the stuff that happens in the United States, but he's paying for that stuff, right? So obviously he's paying for it. You are to be judged not by your words, but by your actions, and your actions are supporting those things that you say you're against.
I would say if like animals are raised with care, they have the like right space to live and everything. They live out their lives, and then they get consumed one day. But that's just how like the world works, right? Not the world, but like the circle of life.
What does the circle of life mean?
Okay, so this circle of life thing, it comes from Lion King, as far as I know. Right, it comes from Lion King, and I can't. It's that Disney movie, right? And I can't believe that grown adults actually appeal to that. It's just unbelievable to me.
Because I guess the circle of life is really that, we're born and we die. That's the circle, isn't it?
Yeah.
But the circle of life and the fact that death is inevitable doesn't necessarily, I don't believe anyway, provide justification for us to take life arbitrarily or without a necessity. Did you agree with that?
The necessity is to feed human beings, right?
But does it have to be done with animal products? For you and I, because obviously the question is why aren't
That's
you
true.
vegan?
That's true. I feel like it's like a opinion thing. I feel like for some people, like originally, like human beings were hunter-gatherers, right? They survived off of consuming other animals. So in that sense, I feel like it is justified if we were to have good practices and go about it the proper way.
So obviously with hunter-gatherers, that was a huge part of our history.
Yeah.
And that was important because eating the animals at that time allowed us to survive and allowed us to continue until we are where we are today. But it was a necessity back then. And this is the thing about wild animals. Other animals do hunt and eat other animals, but they do so because they have to. A lion eats a gazelle because, well, they have to, but also they don't have the moral agency that we have. They don't have the ability to be able to rationalize the impact of their choices. We shouldn't hold ourselves to the same standard as wild animals. Is that something you would agree with or disagree with?
I would agree with that. But
I like this dude. He's like reasonable, right? Let's see how we get to that point where he says that he will go vegan, right? Because that was very interesting in the preview section.
at the same time, human beings are more intelligent for a reason, right? And this is how it works. Like more intelligent species consume other lower intelligent species. Like that works within animals, it works within us. We're just another form of animals.
Sure.
You see, the intelligence thing, right? The intelligence thing is, I suppose people know this, but when we say that intelligence is the thing that gives you moral worth, that leads to very tricky situations, right? Because in that scenario, what you're saying is that intelligence, like the obvious conclusion of that would be that one intelligent person has more moral value than another intelligent person. Intellectual ability is what gives moral worth, but then that's just ableism, right? You're basing someone's moral worth on their ability, and that's ableism, and we all agree that that's bad.
But is that not equal might makes right? Because we can, therefore we are allowed to. Do you think that's true?
I feel like that's getting into a little bit of like political thinking. Right?
Well, I guess because you're saying that the reason it's okay for us to harm other animals and then consume them is because we are intellectually more dominant and because we are physically more dominant. But that subscribes to the idea that might makes right, the idea that because we can do something, we're therefore justified to. But do you think that, so that's one question, does might make right, but also does intelligence define worth of life? Or not define worth of life, but should someone be allowed to be harmed by someone else simply because the person harming them is more intelligent than they are?
Man, you're right, bro. No, that's true. I agree with that. I don't know.
This dude is how do all of you feel about this dude? He's very open-minded, very, very open-minded. I gotta give that to him. Yeah. How many likes do we have on this video? If you're watching this and if you're enjoying this, hit that like button. Saying the typical YouTuber thing now. And if you're not subscribed, subscribe to the channel, right? And by the way, so many of you donated money, right? So many of you donated money. I was like able to raise like a very significant portion of the repair cost of the laptop. And I'm promise I'm not just lying. I can show you, like I'll show you the records and everything. But yeah, like if a few more if I got a few more donations, it would like almost cover the repair costs. And yeah, that would be amazing. So if you have more questions, right, please use the link in the description, a link in the pinned comment, right? So Allison tells me that we have 126 likes, if I'm understanding that correctly, which is awesome. Let's continue, right? Let's continue.
Honestly, the only reason I still eat meat is because it tastes good, and I'm not against like veganism. I am totally
This dude is honest. I like that about him. But let's see. And the reason I like him, I suppose, because I've seen the preview, right? We've seen the preview where he says at the end that he's going vegan, but you can just see the honesty in him. He is not trying to say these ridiculous things that veganism is anti-indigenous or any of that stuff, right? He's just being honest, and that's really admirable. Let's continue.
supporting. I don't even consume red meat anymore. It's just like poultry and that kind of stuff. Even I know like the factory farming is like it's just shit show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why don't you consume red meat if you don't mind me asking?
It's just shit show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why don't you consume red meat if you don't mind me asking?
It's like carcinogenic. It's like I heard it's bad for you. Yeah.
Is it bad for the animals as well? The animals who were killed for it? A bit of a strange question.
Yeah. I mean, they died.
So we talked about earlier. We talked about giving animals a good life.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd like to come back to that because with factory farming, we agree it's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess what we acknowledge, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but do we acknowledge that reducing animal suffering is preferable?
Oh, definitely. I feel like most people would agree with that statement.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, me too. And most people do seem to, which is obviously good because the opposite would be kind of terrifying if people are like, no, we shouldn't try to reduce suffering. Anyway, so we agree that factory farming is wrong, and we agree it's wrong because of the practices which cause suffering, the confinement, the mutilations, and such. So that's bad. So then you and I are at the same point, and then we start coming down this road together, agreeing with each other, and then there's a point where you stop and I keep going, and you stop at the good practices bit, and I keep going to the no farming of animals at all bit, the veganism bit. So the reason why I don't stop here is for a couple of reasons. Firstly, because if an animal's living a good life, at what point do we then say that they've had enough of a good life? Because we're saying, this is fine because the animals are happy, but at a certain point we have to say enough happiness for you. You can't be any more happy. You've had your fill of happiness. When do we make that decision?
It's interesting, right? It's like you're done being happy now. You're done being happy now. Enough happiness for you. You die now. Right? That's like if you put it in that way, it's just so obvious why this stuff is wrong, right?
But I could also like counter that question with like, how do you know if the animals are being happy? The animals don't really have like a lot of intelligence.
Is that dog over there happy?
I'm sure we don't eat dogs, man. Come on.
Yeah.
It's a bit different. With like chickens, they have a lifespan. I don't know how long their lifespan is, but it's not as long as humans, right?
No.
So
does it have to be for them to deserve moral consideration? Does it have to be a long life?
No, but I feel like also they can't express their happiness and like they can't express their contentment, and it's a bit different, right? They don't have
I don't think Ed should let him like run this argument because like this happiness thing was the other guy's point, right? As long as they have had a happy life, as long as they've had a good life, sort of. This is the non-vegans' points, not the Ed's point. And I think Ed should have pointed it out, but I do realize that I'm saying that from the comfort of my bedroom, bedroom and studio, and Ed is sitting there, so it might be difficult to come up with that on the spot. So I do recognize that, but I think he should have pointed that out, or maybe he didn't for some reason that I just don't know. But yeah, let's continue.
they don't have feelings the same way we do.
How do you know that?
I don't know that specifically, but
we can look at his behavioral aspects and attributes. Like for the dog, the dog's a very convenient example for me because the dog's right there, right? So that dog's been having the dog is beautiful and having a lovely time. All those scratches. So it's a convenient example, but it does illustrate the point, which is that non-human animals are different to us, but there are certain behavioral things such as the way they vocalize things, the way that they act. We can see pain and suffering in the way that animals act, but you can also see contentment and pleasure as well. So we may.
Another interesting point here, right? An analogy to this point is that, like, for example, for me, English is my third language, right? And like, let's say I never learned English. Let's say I only stuck with my first two languages. And yeah, if I was able to, but even then, if I never spoke English, right, I would not be able to communicate with most of you. I would not be able to communicate with either of them, I would imagine. but they would still be able to tell when I'm happy or when I'm in pain. Like if someone is punching me and I'm screaming in pain, they would be able to tell but that I'm in pain, that I'm suffering, right? And in a similar way, just because non-human animals do not speak our languages, we can still tell from their behaviors that they are, whether when they're in pain, when they're suffering, when they're happy, and so forth. Yeah, yeah. I think that's a good analogy. I think. What do you think, chat? Tell me how you feel about that analogy.
May not recognize it in the same way that we do because they are different to us, but they have the basic components that create emotion, a brain, a nervous system, all of these things that we have and the things that create emotion within us, they also possess. We're kind of saying that it's okay to do these things to animals because we don't have the ability to empathize with them as easily as we do with humans.
I think that's true.
But does that mean that we're justified in harming them? I mean, we recognize
That would also be the case. Like humans can't empathize as easily with non-human animals because they can't speak our languages. But it would also be the case that a British person, at least like 200 years ago, they would not be able to empathize with me because I wouldn't speak their language back then, right?
as they feel pain. We recognize that they can suffer.
Yeah. I don't think you got me in a tight spot here, because I'm not for animal cruelty in any way, right? But I am. Maybe, hold up.
What about a slaughterhouse? You say you're not for animal cruelty, but to eat meat, an animal has to go into a slaughterhouse. Mm-hmm. And even with dairy and eggs, of course, they're not physically killed for dairy and eggs, but they do also end up in a slaughterhouse because at a certain point their production declines. So it's not profitable to keep them alive, and then they can be sold for meat. So every animal who we farm is eventually killed in a slaughterhouse. Does that constitute cruelty in your eyes or not?
That definitely constitutes cruelty. I'm going vegan.
Okay, so here we were at the top. We disagree with facts.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so that was the preview at the beginning. Is he being serious right now? Because if he is, that's great, right? Yeah.
Farming. We come along and you stopped here. And you stopped here because you felt the animals were given a good life. And even if that is true, they still have to go to a slaughterhouse at a certain point. So then we have to come down a bit further. So if we think that the reduction of animal suffering is morally preferable, then the best way to reduce animal suffering to its fullest extent is to not exploit them in any capacity. Is to not take them to any slaughterhouse or take their life in any way needlessly, which is why veganism becomes the morally preferable choice, because it's the fullest reduction of suffering that we can achieve for the animals who we farm. What do you think about that?
No, that's true. No, that's definitely true. I feel like taking away slaughterhouses and everything is definitely the most moral thing we could do for animals. But also that takes away a huge source of food for the human race. It's like source of food for the human race. It's like we're not just taking away meat, we're taking away dairy, eggs, anything that's produced by an animal, which also has clothes and everything. That's
right.
That's
He's smart. He realizes that it's not just about the food, right? It's also about the things we wear.
I mean, you're really well versed in this.
Thank you.
You're really well spoken, honestly.
I appreciate that. That's very kind. You said about
you're it's right on.
Well, I appreciate that. You said about the food thing. And you say it takes away a large amount of food. And I would counter that and say that actually the production of animal products takes away a lot of food. That sounds strange, but the animals who we farm are fed something. And for the majority of them, because they're factory farmed, that means they're fed grains and they're fed soy and corn and stuff like that. And it's not to say that we want to eat what animals eat. We don't want to eat their diets. That wouldn't be so good. But the land that is currently used to produce feed for them is huge. So in the US, for example, just under half of all the land mass of the contiguous US states, so that's all the states except for Alaska and Hawaii, is used to produce animal food. Only 4% of the entire land mass of the US is used to produce food directly for human consumption. So we have this huge problem where 20% of land in the US is used to produce just beef, 20%, and yet it only provides us 3% of our calories. Now, if we repurpose land...
That's such a huge disparity, isn't it? Yeah. By the way, this I think has been the longest live stream I have ever done. So let me know let me know how it is, right? Because I've never done this before, and I'm really enjoying it. And I had never watched these Earthling Ed videos because I had never had the time. Like I am busy creating my own sort of. But so I'm really enjoying watching these videos with all of you. I'd like to know how all of you are feeling about this. Let's continue watching.
And we could produce so much more food. And I'm going to give you one more stat. I don't want to be too science heavy with it because it's a bit tedious, but a piece of research was done that said that if we took all of the land that's currently used to grow food for animals, so just the feed for animals, we could grow enough food to feed another 350 million people. So actually, whilst we may think that we're removing food, we're actually creating the opportunity to produce more food than we currently do. So it's crazy. And it's just another symptom of this broken system that we currently exist in when it comes to agriculture.
Yeah. I think a lot of it has to do with just the way people are raised and like the culture that people were brought up with. Like eating animals has been around for probably as long as humans have been around.
Well, yeah, more or less, we could say.
But yeah, it's gonna be hard to like. You can convince me, but it's gonna be hard to convince like 7 billion people or not.
Yeah, I mean, like every moral progress takes time, and like one of the most successful moral progress that I have ever seen has been the consider how long it took to abolish slavery in the United States or elsewhere in the world, to abolish slavery in India, to get rid of colonialism from India. All of that took a very long time, and of course, moral progress takes time, but it starts at the like it starts small and then it builds up, and you don't really have to convince 7 billion or 8 billion people. It is understood that once you reach like a certain tipping point, right, the further social change happens very, very rapidly. And I think the tipping point is 25%. So you only have to convince 25% of the population, and then it just snowballs. It just gets larger and larger and larger and larger. So yeah, that's, I think, a useful thing to point out. You don't have to convince the entire world, you just have to convince 1/4, which is still a long way ahead, but yeah.
I don't know how many vegans there are minus that, but
yeah, not as many as we need, that's for sure. But the point is, the reason I'm here today is to convince people like yourself and to have conversations with people, because I believe that we have a lot of power, more than we realize. Now, obviously, agriculture is propped up by government subsidies, by legislation and such, which makes it hard for us to think that we can combat it through our consumer choices. But it is a consumer-driven industry, supply and demand and all these different aspects. And so we actually have a lot of power every single day.
Studying that stuff.
Yeah, right. It's true, right?
Choice,
consumer choice. And ultimately, what we have to decide every single day is, do we want to contribute to a system that increases suffering or reduces suffering? And that's the choice that we have. What would your answer to that be? Reduce or increase?
Like when you phrase it like that, it's very difficult to say that, I want to support the system that causes more suffering, right? And Ed knows this, right? And but it really is how it is, right? It has to be stated how it is, and Ed is doing just that, right? Yeah.
I would like to reduce suffering for everyone.
And how can we do that when it comes to food?
Go vegan.
So will you?
Yes. Maybe slowly.
Okay. And
I think it'll be a process. I think it's gonna be hard to go cold turkey.
So let me make it simpler for you. The prospect of going vegan is daunting because we take our current position in life and we say, I've got to change all of this, and then for the rest of my life, I'm going to be living this specific way. That's psychologically terrifying. So what we have to do is simplify it right now. And the way to do that is think of foods that you currently enjoy eating. It could be pastas, curries, stir fries, tacos, nachos.
I really, really, really like this, dude. I wish that when I start doing my own activism, right, that people are this receptive and this open, because that would be a blessing, right? I don't believe in miracles, but if that happens, that would be a miracle, right?
burritos, burgers, pies. It could be anything, whatever you enjoy eating. There's a lot of delicious foods there. And you just have to take out the non-vegan components and replace them with something vegan. So for me, spaghetti bolognese was used to be one of my favorite foods. Still is, because I just take out the beef mince and replace it with soy mince or lentils or something else instead. So we're not reinventing the wheel. We're just merely changing little components of it. And that's a way to simplify it down. And then you do it day by day, meal by meal. Instead of going, from this moment on, I'm going to be vegan for the rest of my life, you say, my next meal is going to be a vegan meal. My next meal after that is going to be a vegan meal. And then you do it meal by meal by meal by meal. And eventually you no longer want to eat animal products. But you haven't got there by giving yourself this huge ultimatum. You've got there by just taking it day by day by day until eventually you reach the point where you go, well, why would I want to kill an animal when I don't have to?
Yeah, that's a very good point. Like in the beginning, it's daunting, right? It's incredibly daunting, but like after a certain point, it's not that you begrudgingly feel that you have to in order to accord with your rational moral conclusions. It is that you don't want to anymore, right? You don't want to contribute to this unnecessary industry of unimaginable animal suffering, right? So yeah, someone just said that Earthling Ed posted a new video. We'll watch that after this one. This is going to be a long live stream. Let's see how long we can take this.
So just simplify it down, do it day by day, meal by meal, and just replace the components of your favorite dishes with vegan stuff instead. And I think that's the way to go.
Definitely.
What do you think about that?
That's a great way to do it. Yeah, actually, I didn't even think about that. Is your cameraman vegan?
Yeah.
Yeah, right on, bro.
You wouldn't be hired if he wasn't.
I know, I was going to say. No, right on.
And I think that's the way to go.
Definitely.
What do you think about that?
That's a great way to do it. Yeah, actually, I didn't even think about that. Is your cameraman vegan?
Yeah.
No, right on, bro.
You wouldn't be hired if he
I
wasn't.
know, I was going to say.
But we
I think the cameraman. When was this posted? Let's see. I think the cameraman is Hudson Tarlow. Yeah, Hudson Tarlow. So yeah, that would be great. Hudson's a great guy, and yeah, Ed wouldn't hire him otherwise, right? So yeah, let's carry on.
We weren't born vegan. And this is an important point, and maybe we'll end at this. We weren't born vegan, but we had to ask ourselves a series of questions. And one of them is related to what you said at the beginning, that we enjoy how these foods taste. And one of the questions I asked myself is, what has higher value, taste or life? So let me ask you that question. What has higher value, our taste buds or the life of an animal?
Well, that's like a hard question to answer, you know, like you're asking me to choose whether a life or like something that's temporary, you know, like a taste bud. One way to look at it is like we're only alive for what, like 80 to 100 years, right? And the Earth's been around for much longer than that. So why would you limit yourself to a certain amount of flavors when there's like exponential amount of flavors to try?
Because someone has to suffer and have their life taken from them for some of the flavors we're talking about.
It's not someone.
Are animals not someone's?
No, I feel like they're animals.
But you by yourself said earlier that we're animals as well.
We are, but now we're back to that whole thing.
Well, what are, if an animal isn't a someone, what are they? A something?
You refer to animals as someone? Okay.
Why don't you? Or why wouldn't you?
I don't know. I just never have.
Yeah, it's strange, right?
Yeah.
But this is another thing. The way we talk about animals and the language we use is constantly degrading them. So what we say something, or we call them an it, because it's devaluing their life and their individuality. If we acknowledge that all the animals we farm are someone's who are individuals having their own subjective experiences, it becomes very hard to justify slitting their throats for a meal that lasts 15 minutes when you recognize they're an individual whose entire existence, think about this, their entire existence has been taken from them for 15 minutes of sensory pleasure on our end. That is potentially one of the most arbitrary things that we could possibly use to justify taking someone's entire life from them. You know, the process of what they're forced to endure.
It's like, think about with that thing with the cat, right? Kurt Zouma and the cat. Like, think about what he was doing, right? And he was doing it for like his enjoyment, right? And that was not justified. But when we're killing an animal, right, for our temporary taste pleasure, we're doing pretty much the same thing, right? And we just as that was arbitrary and that was not justified, this too isn't arbitrary and not justified.
And then having their throat cut for something that we eat and then forget about almost instantly.
Yeah.
And that's why these flavors aren't more important, because we're talking about someone's existence. And that is a someone because they're an individual, a sentient, conscious being with feelings who obviously is very different to us, but in the same way that our life is valuable to us, their life is valuable to them. They fight for their lives. You know, they don't willfully walk into a slaughterhouse. They struggle and fight to get out. They're fearful and scared. And we force them into these environments that we can put them between two slices of bread and call it a sandwich. I don't know. I'm getting emotional, but I think that's a travesty. I really do. Yeah. What do you think?
Okay.
That's a really good way to put it. By the way, Ed has just put out a video reacting to that code Zouma thing. And yeah, I think after this we're going to watch that, right? So get ready. Don't skip, right? Because I'm pretty sure that Ed's video is not going to include like pictures of animal cruelty, because that's just not what Ed's channel is about.
Yeah, you got me, bro. No, that's true. I can't even argue with that.
Yeah, I know.
No, you can't. It's hard to argue
I
with
normally
that.
get emotional, but I just think that it's such a severe thing that we do, and it's for something that's so irrelevant in the grand scheme of what we can achieve as humans. We want a better world, a world without suffering. Well, one of the best ways we can reduce suffering is by changing what's on our plates, you know, and that can be a good stepping stone to addressing other issues as well. Of course, it doesn't end there,
Definitely.
but it's a great way to start.
Definitely.
All right.
Yeah, I think so too.
Cool. All right.
Holy shit.
Oh shit.
Bro, that was great.
Thank you, my friends.
Very
Thank
well
you.
versed.
Thank you. I
Very well
appreciate that.
versed.
I think this is the nicest person that I have ever seen in a Earthling Ed video.
Well, thank you. It's very kind.
You're the man.
He is the man. If you're interested over there, are they still there? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we have flyers. We have
There's-
a campaign against Tyson food.
And they're a vegan organization, so they can
I'm
help you.
against Tyson too.
Okay, but actually, just a brief thing to mention. Okay, you say you're against factory farming. This is the last point.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
what you have to recognize is that over 99.9% of the animal products in this country come from factory farms. So when we buy these products, that's according to the USDA. When we buy these products, we're directly supporting an industry that we know to be terrible. So it's just something to think about as well.
99.9%.
According to the USDA, yeah, it's a huge number.
That's crazy. Is it like that worldwide?
More or less. Well, in developed nations.
Developed nations.
And in nations that are developing, who are becoming more economically sufficient, and their agriculture is getting that case there.
Yeah.
You know, the number of animals that we're killing is increasing, not decreasing, unfortunately. But hopefully we can curb that.
Are the number of animals produced?
Yeah. That's a depressing fact, isn't it? Like, we say that the world is becoming a better place, but like from the perspective of a chicken, it's really not. It's really really not. So yeah, that's just terrible. Like, the world is not becoming, like, if you take the totality of what's happening, when you take this fact in, right? The world is not becoming a better place, really.
Increasing as well?
We're at 80 billion land animals, and we kill somewhere between 0.8 and 2.3 trillion marine animals. Yeah, that's fish. So it's a staggering number. Shocking.
I didn't even think about fish. Oh my god.
I know. Yeah. They count as well.
I apologize for all meat eaters and all non-vegans.
We get there. I think the same ones. So that's cool.
My man.
All right, take it easy.
Let me get you guys on socials.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so Ed just released a video about the Kurd Zouma thing. Let's watch that, shall we? Yeah. And again, if you have some questions, I'll be happy to answer them. Like, just submit them through the link in the pinned comment, and that would also help me significantly in the repair costs of the laptop that's over there. I'm streaming to my sister's laptop, which she uses for school, so I'll have to return this. So yeah. If you have any questions, do submit them through the link in the pinned comment or via a super chat, right? Yeah, let's continue.
So the professional West Ham football player Kurt Zouma has been exposed as an animal abuser due to a piece of footage that was released online showing him kicking, slapping, and throwing things at his cat. Predictably, this has caused a massive outcry online, with people calling for him to face criminal charges, including the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan.
It's despicable. I think a number of things need to happen urgently. I think the RSPCA and the police need to work together to prosecute this player. I'm disappointed in David Moyes and West Ham, actually.
But to be honest, this just feels very extreme. I mean, what gives these people the right to force their views down Kurt Zouma's throat? After all, Kurt was clearly enjoying what he was doing, so he should be allowed to continue doing it.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Like they're forcing their beliefs down Kurt Zuma's throat, aren't they? That's they shouldn't do it, right? They should be at least a little bit milder about it. These militant cat rights activists, like I was considering becoming a decent human being, right? But because of the behaviors of these militant cat rights activists, I don't want to anymore. I just want to do more of what Kurt Zouma was doing. And if these people behaved in a more milder manner, in a non-militant manner, perhaps they wouldn't be pushing so many people away from their movement. Yeah.
Plus, they're only a cat, so why are people being so militant? After all, humans are still suffering, you know. And not to mention that animals have been dominated by humans for thousands of years. We are the most superior species, of course. And I'm sure these people criticizing Kurt Zouma probably own phones and drive cars anyway, so they're just a bunch of hypocrites.
Yes, because the phones, they require like slave labor and this kind of stuff, right? That's the claim that meat eaters make to vegans. And so Earthling Ed is very right in pointing out to these cat rights activists that they own phones, so how dare they accuse Kurt Zouma of doing something wrong? They are just equally complicit.
And look, I have no problem with people being against kicking and slapping cats. I just think these people should stop trying to force others to also be against kicking and slapping cats as well. After all, it's a personal choice at the end of the day, so let's just live and let live, right? That doesn't sound so good, does it? In truth, I clearly side with the Mayor of London and everyone else calling for Kurt Zouma to face criminal charges. After all, aren't examples like these the exact reason why we have animal cruelty laws in the first place? I mean, we know that animal cruelty laws don't actually do anything to protect animals on farms, so if they also don't do anything to protect animals such as dogs and cats, then why do they even exist in the first place? The RSPCA have taken Kurt's cats away from him, so hopefully that's the end of their suffering. And it also provides a nice opportunity for the RSPCA to continue the facade of seeming like they truly care about the best interests of animals, whilst continuing to profit off of an industry that literally causes more suffering to animals than any other in the world. But the purpose of this video is to try and dissect what the case of Kurt Zouma teaches us about how we view animal cruelty. I want to start by reading out what is possibly the most jaw-dropping quote you could possibly think of for this story. And the quote is from the footballing website Football 365, and it's referencing David Moyes, who is the West Ham football manager, who has continued to select Kurt Zouma for football matches, even though he's fully aware that Kurt is an animal abuser. Moyes surely can't think this all goes away without Zouma missing some football. We're talking about cruelty to animals here. The only thing British people hate more than cruelty to animals is vegans. I mean, doesn't this just sum up everything perfectly? It's so ironic, it's almost unbelievable. In fact, the first time I read the quote, I was thinking,
this is like satire. This is like satire.
surely this is some sort of self-aware comment that the author has put in there. Maybe they're a vegan secretly, and they're trying to show the hypocrisy of how we view animal cruelty and how we view vegans. But unfortunately, after reading the article and the comments underneath it, I see nothing to suggest that it is this self-aware comment, and instead it's just the jaw-dropping quote that it seems that it is. And then there's the comments made by the West Ham football manager David Moyes himself, who, when questioned about why he chose to continue playing Kurt Zouma, said, "I am an animal lover, but..."
For me, yeah, because I'm a big animal lover, and I think it's something which will have affected a lot of people, so I'm really disappointed with it. But as I said before, my job tonight was to try and win for West Ham and put the best team out I could to give me that chance.
Because animal cruelty is bad, but fielding a slightly weakened football team for an inconsequential sports match is obviously much worse. Stories like this are obviously...
Like, okay, what is your take on this, right? Because we live in a non-vegan world, right, where people are doing far worse to pigs and chickens and goats and so forth, and they are not facing any consequence for that, right? They're not facing any consequence for that. But like Kurt Zuma is supposed to face prison charges and prosecution and that kind of stuff. So, like, what do you think of that? I'd be very interested to know, like, the chat's opinion on this, right? So let me know what you think.
very frustrating. Firstly, because they're about much worse. Stories like this are obviously very frustrating. Firstly, because they're about animal suffering and the suffering that individual animal has had to endure, but also because they painfully reveal to us our incredibly paradoxical and hypocritical attitudes when it comes to different species of animals. Somebody kicking a cat garners international attention and calls from people for them to be criminally prosecuted, but the suffering and cruelty that's inflicted on pigs, cows, chickens, ducks, lambs, marine animals, and all the animals that we conventionally exploit still continues to be ignored. Now, obviously, I'm in full support of the condemnation that Kurt Zuma has been receiving, and I hope that he is punished for what he has done. But if kicking a cat
Okay, do you think he should be? Like, I'm asking the chat here. Do you think he should be, given that we live in a non-vegan world, but given that people are just doing far worse every single day, and Kurt Zuma himself is doing far worse every single day when he eats breakfast, right? Do you think he should be punished for this? I'd be very interested to know what all of you think.
garners all of this global outrage and condemnation, then why isn't the same outrage or even more outrage given to the pigs who are forced into gas chambers and gassed to death, or the mother cows and baby lambs who have their throats cut unnecessarily? Why doesn't that garner anywhere near the same amount of outrage? Because the suffering and violence is not only magnified significantly more, but the sheer numbers of animals who are suffering through all of these practices that are normal and legally condoned is far higher. So why are we only selectively outraged by certain incidences of animal cruelty and not by the systemic animal cruelty that we as a society pay for every single day? If slapping a cat causes the Mayor of London to state on live television that that person should face criminal prosecution, then why are we so quick to jump to the defense of animal farmers who lock animals in cages so small these animals can't turn around in them, who mutilate animals by cutting off their tails and cutting out their teeth, who forcibly penetrate and forcibly impregnate animals, take their babies away from them, force them into slaughterhouses, and profit off of their needless and unnecessary slaughter?
Exactly, right? So I'm not sure for that reason that Kurt Zuma should face legal prosecution. Not because what he has done is not terrible. What he has done is absolutely terrible. But what he has done is not any worse than what he does otherwise when he eats breakfast. Right? Is the point I'm trying to make.
Why is one so wrong and the other worthy of us defending? I mean, just decide for yourself. Would you rather be slapped or have your body parts cut off? Would you rather be
Exactly.
slapped or
Exactly. Right? Because what happens to pigs, like cutting off a body part, that's far, far worse, right? That's far worse. And yeah, I don't know. By the way, I think we're reaching the three we're reaching the 3 hour mark. I could go on further really, but I don't know if everyone is interested. But while we're on the stream, it would be really amazing if we could raise some more money, because that would help me do more activism, like better make better videos and so forth, right? So if you could help me out with that, and like if you have any questions for me, right, really, that would be great. So yeah, let's continue.
forcibly penetrated? Would you rather be slapped or needlessly slaughtered? Now, the reason I ask those questions isn't to try and diminish what Kurt Zuma did or to diminish the suffering of the cat who was having that cruelty inflicted upon them. I don't mean to diminish it at all, but more to ask the wider question, which is, why is slapping a cat met with such disgust? But all of the practices they just described are not met or discussed, and are even protected and defended by the very same people who are professing disgust at what Kurt Zouma has done. And not only that, but we then claim that the farmers who we are paying to do these things to animals love their animals. And we say that all of these practices are high welfare. And then we say that slaughtering these animals by forcing them into gas chambers or cutting their throats is compassionate and humane.
Exactly. Exactly. Right? Doesn't make any sense.
Question is, why is slapping a cat morally abhorrent? But all of the other things that I've just described that happen to other animals who are sentient, conscious.
Like, imagine someone saying about Kurt Zouma, he's actually an animal lover. He loves the cats that he was slapping, loves the cat that he was slapping and throwing and kicking, right? Imagine someone said that, but people have no qualm saying that um the animal farmers that who do the same things but to different animals.
Feeling beings who suffer just in the same way as Kurt Zouma's cat. Why is all of the things that we do to them allowed, permissible, and defended? Where is the logic? I mean, seriously, how did we manage to get this so blatantly wrong? What would we say if Kurt Zouma turned around and said that he loved his cats? What would we think of him? And yet animal farmers will do all of the terrible things to animals that I've just previously described and do it just to make money from doing so. And they turn around and say to us that they love their animals. And we don't even question that. So let's go back to that quote that I read out earlier, because it makes no sense, but also it makes complete sense, because the first part succinctly explains the second part. The only thing British people hate more than animal cruelty is vegans. We all love to claim that we're against animal cruelty, and we all jump on anything that shows someone causing harm to a dog or a cat, because we try not to cause harm to dogs and cats. But when a group of people come along who don't just simply pay lip service to the issue of animal cruelty and animal suffering, but instead try to live in a way that minimizes the impact that they have, that causes us to feel annoyed and frustrated, because the cruelty and suffering they're trying to minimize and remove from their life is cruelty and suffering that we continue to partake in and pay for every single day. These people, vegans, show us that we are hypocrites, and they essentially leave us with two choices. The first choice is, of course, recognizing the absurdity and hypocrisy of saying that we're against animal cruelty while simultaneously paying for industries that cause more suffering and cruelty than any other on the planet. Or the second thing that we can do is get defensive and annoyed at vegans and call them preachy and militant. And look, I am very relieved that people have reacted the way they have to Kurt Zouma. If people weren't outraged, I'd feel very, very concerned. But at the end of the day, I just want people to reflect on the cruelty and suffering that they cause to animals. So let me know down below what you think of this story, what you think about Kurt Zouma, and what you think about people's hypocritical attitudes towards animals, because I'm always interested to know what you guys think about stories such as these. All right, thank you all so much for watching. I really do appreciate it, and I'll see you all in the next video.
Should we watch another Earthling Ed video? What do you think? What should we watch next? I have a playlist. Oh. I have a playlist, but let's figure out what we should watch next. Let's make it a short video that we watch next, because I'm not sure if I can, like, how much longer I can go on. But yeah.
I see these guys, they have jobs.
How long is this? Oh, this is 1 hour long. Yeah, I'm not reacting to this. Apparently someone said, what should we watch next? Let's watch some Joey Carbstrong, shall we? Or just watch more Earthling Ed? What should we do? Let me know. Let me know in the live chat. More Earthling Ed or Joey Carbstrong? Okay, before we proceed, we do have a super chat. We do have a super chat. I can't read your name because I imagine it's in some East Asian language, right? But yeah, thank you so much. Um, uh, like whatever, like, thank you so much. And they're right. Carnists specialize in calling others hypocrites. Yeah, well, they are the hypocrites, right? While they call others hypocrites, and that I suppose makes them hypocrites in another layer. That's interesting. By the way, thank you so much for the donation. Really helps me make more of these videos that I would imagine you enjoy, right? So thank you so much. And it would also, I think, I've covered like almost half of the repair costs of the laptop. If I can go on for a little while longer, I think we should be able to cover like 2/3, maybe 2/3 of the cost of repairing the laptop, and that would be great. And I'm and I'm not expecting like to raise the entire amount of the laptop repair cost, but yeah, like that would be amazing. So let's. I think people are asking me to watch some Joey Carbstrong, right? So let's do that. Let's do that. Let's go to Joey's channel. This is a video that I started watching, but I never finished. So let's watch that.
See, there you go. You might have just changed my life.
No worries, brother. I'm actually a turkey farmer today.
Yeah?
Yeah. I'm trying to stop vegans from shutting down the turkey industry.
Ain't that the opposite of what you do?
Yeah. But I'm trying to do a reverse psychology thing. People see this is the turkey industry, and I say I'm a turkey farmer. And I'm trying to get people to sign a petition to stop vegans from shutting that down. And then when they look at that, they'll go, well, wait a second, I don't want to support that.
How long have you been here for?
About 45 minutes.
Okay.
We got two. We had a bit of support.
Yeah. All right. How do you think it's going to go?
Well, I'm hoping people go, no way, I'm supporting that. And I'll go, well, do you eat it? So thanks for supporting us. Yeah, they peck each other in the sheds. Yeah. Do you support the industry? Are you a meat eater? Yeah. You watch my videos, though. You do see my videos.
I'm open to life. I know I've got no religion.
That's good.
It is what it is.
I'm glad you're open-minded. That means you don't shut things out that are true. Yeah.
100% true.
Yeah.
100% true.
So he's doing a reverse psychology thing right here, and yeah, that's very good, right? Joey is very good at what he does, and Joey was very kind to come on the podcast, and he was the first guest on the podcast, right? And that meant so much to me. So yeah, I think the reverse psychology thing is going to work, but then this guy already knows what Joey used to do, right? That he already watches the videos, so I'm not sure how much that is going to work. But yeah, let's find out how this goes. But before we proceed, we do have a huge donation from at Ian the Pig, who has tipped me $50. That is amazing, right? Who says, for the animals and the laptop. Thank you so much, Ian. Means a lot. Yeah, let's continue. By the way, you can also, as someone just did, join my Patreon. The link is in the description box. It's not in the pinned comment. You can join the Patreon team as well, and you get some exclusive benefits. So yeah, if you'd rather do that, you can do that. So thank you. Let's continue watching.
So why haven't you made any steps or anything?
To be perfectly honest with you, if someone gave me a meal plan
Yeah.
And went to me, this is a month meal plan, no meat. Gave me a meal plan.
Yeah.
And went to me, this is a month meal plan, no meat. And it was
good.
I mean, I don't live off meat.
Oh, good. So you just need to know how, and you'll do it.
I just need to know.
But you agree with the principle, like of not harming animals and that.
So what he's saying, okay, so he agrees, but he just doesn't know how. And I feel like that might be the situation of a lot of people, because as vegans we tend to say that, just stop eating meat. But that's not how you should do veganism. And if that's how you do veganism, you might fall ill, because you can't just pick out the meat and then you're golden. No, you have to replace your protein sources and that kind of stuff, right? Otherwise you're going to fall sick. So yeah, so let's see how this goes again.
I don't know where I stand with the harming animals. Yeah, that.
Are you generally against harming animals?
Am I against it?
Yeah, like
cruelty and things like that. Yes, 100%.
How do you define cruelty?
Yeah, this is I've seen the videos. I don't know. I have no
Or is it cruel for me to shoot you in the head? Is it cruel for me to shoot? Would I be acting in a cruel way if I shot you in the head?
I've got different views on humanity and animals.
Oh,
I
really?
don't see them as equals.
Okay. Yeah, but for what reason? I would ask.
Joe, this is such a contrast between Joey and Ed, right? Ed is this like mild has this sort of mild approach which works on some people, and Joey has this very direct in your face approach. And I really love like both of them, right? And I enjoy watching both of them. So like Earthling Ed would be like, is it wrong to like kill, like should a, like he won't even say that. He's like, would it be wrong to shoot a dog in the head or something like that? And on the other hand, Joey is like, would it be immoral? Would it be cruel for me to shoot you in the head? I just love the contrast between the two of them. It's amazing, and they're both amazing.
Do you know what? To be honest with you, I don't know why there are chickens.
Yeah.
Apart from if they want fed and people want them as pets, what are you going to do with millions and millions of chickens? They can't be on the planet.
Now, why are they here?
Well, they're here to feed. And
Well,
obviously,
they're here because they're bred into existence.
They're bred into existence. And the reason I don't like about the meat industry, if I had a choice, I've got children.
Yeah.
I would have rather my children not eat meat, dairy, things like that, especially milk.
Yeah.
The drugs that they pump into.
The antibiotics.
That I'm against.
Yeah.
And I don't want that shit in me.
Yeah.
But who am I?
Yeah, that's
Who
good
am
for
I
your,
to say?
your
Do you
health.
know what I
That's
mean?
good.
Who am I to
But
say?
if your kids if you walked into one of your children's room and you seen them being cruel to an animal,
Yeah.
what would you say to them? You would teach them that it was wrong.
They'll get a licking from me.
Yeah, okay. But every time you put meat on the table, you're teaching them otherwise.
Mm.
I haven't sat down.
So he's like teaching his kids one thing, like right. He says he get a licking from me. I think that means that they're going to get a beating. I think, which is again something questionable. But yeah, like he's teaching two different things at the same time.
Children and that conversation of how
You see how people can grow up confused? I grew up confused because I was fed meat, dairy, and eggs, a product of animals being subjugated and killed, right? But I was also taught not to be cruel to the cats and the dogs. And if someone see me burning a cow, singeing them in the eye with some hot iron, people would say I was a lunatic. But animals are tortured and killed for our dinner plates every single day. And that's why people are confused. Torture is right through the industry.
Yeah.
It's right through the industry. I mean, I could explain a few acts of torture that happen in the industry, if you want. Mutilations happen, tails being snipped off, teeth being clipped down, beaks being snipped off of birds, and
you know what? 100% I agree. That is bullshit.
Yeah.
It is what it is. That's bullshit.
Yeah.
If it was
better?
If it was, yes, 100% it has to be done better. And there must be a better way of, there's got to be a better way of doing it. But
there's also there's cruel. There's doing it in a better way, right? And then there's leave them alone.
So it's an alternate, like two things. Like there are three ways of it: doing it in the worst possible ways in factory farms, doing it in a better way, killing them in a better way, and then just leaving them alone. That's such a good point, because the options, like we're not when it's like a like presenting just two options when there is indeed a third option, right? So we have to look at the third option, and the third option is to just leave them alone.
There is that.
Yeah, and I think that's the vegan option, and that exists. That option exists. Like,
You've got the guys over the road. They're here probably every other day. Yeah, I'm not from Manchester. I work.
are the like people with the TV screens and that?
That's it, and they're supporting their religion.
Oh, you mean the people that preach Islam and?
That's it.
Yeah.
Now, if Christianity will pass, they're going to go war.
This is my religion. Yeah.
I don't know about that. Now we have war.
Conflict.
Of course.
Yeah.
So,
But veganism has no religion. Veganism is a principle against.
Is it right or wrong?
Yeah, well,
What religion is right?
all you have to do is follow your moral compass, how you view animals. Do you believe they can feel pain and suffer? Okay, so do you believe it's wrong to needlessly cause them pain and suffering?
I think it's sorry.
Do you think it's wrong to needlessly cause them pain and suffering?
No, that's what I'm saying to you. It's got to be a better way.
So you would prefer they did that? You would prefer that people didn't needlessly, like without reason, without justification, harm animals?
No, I mean this is the whole farming animals. Yeah, how they are raised, how they are kept, food. Should they have a normal life? Let's bullshit.
They're culling them.
That's the kind of shit I'm talking about. It's fucked
Well, this
up.
happens all the time.
Don't need this.
They do. They would either have to spend thousands on vet care for these animals when they're going to be slaughtered anyway, or they just cull them on the farm. It's way more cost effective. They would lose. It's all money, but you give them that money. You support them.
They also pay my council tax and my taxes to the government.
But you can't choose where that money goes, but you can choose what you eat. Yeah.
Like again, it's not about doing, like it's not about being perfect here, right? It's about doing what we can do, right? Which is the point that we as vegans try to make.
If I had a turkey here, which I rescued a turkey last year called Tinsel, beautiful animal, really intelligent, like dogs, really smart. It doesn't matter if they're smart. What matters is they can experience and they're aware. All right. If I had that bird here and I started, grabbed a knife and started slashing their head off, would you cringe? Yeah, me too. I'd stop someone. I'd say, yeah, come on. Yeah.
It's a bit humane.
Yeah, but if you paid me to do it.
Yeah, this is what I mean. It's got to be a bit of method.
Well, okay.
You can't just
pay me to do that good method. What's the good method?
You've got like soldiers in the war,
yeah?
Soldier will come along, it will shoot the bullets that they're using. As soon as it impacts you, you're pretty much dead.
Depends where it hits you, yeah.
Yeah, you're gonna, if you bleed out,
split
that's
you through here, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or someone can come along with a cleaver and saw your head off.
Now, if it was you and you had to die, I'm not going to torture you for a long period of time. If you ask me, hey bro, can you just end it? These are the only two options you had: torture you or just end it. It would be more humane for me to just end it. Okay. But what if there's a third option, right?
There's never a third option.
There is.
There's never a third option.
No. In this hypothetical,
yeah,
there's a third option, and it's I don't have to kill you at all. It's my choice, all right? And imagine if I chose the more humane option when I had of killing you, when I had an option not to kill you. What would you say about me?
Well, that's
You say I'm choosing to kill you when I don't need to.
Yeah, but
is that cruel?
That's what we talked about earlier. It's not just not between the two choices, right? It's there's a third option of not killing, right? The option is right there.
It's in a box, yeah. And if you step outside the box, you're gonna get prosecuted one way or another.
Yeah.
So
a legal thing.
Have you never had any problems? Come back on me.
For this, for asking people not to. Yeah. I mean, like I get abused online and things like that, but in person, not often. No. Yeah, like a lot of people silently agree with my. People agree that animals shouldn't be caused suffering because most people are against factory farms, right? But if they agree with that principle, they agree that animals value their lives and their experience in their lives. So to murder them is wrong. It has to be.
For me, it's not. I see the way they're kept. Yeah. Got millions.
It's.
Chickens. There's no space to remove their wings.
They have to.
They've done that from birth.
Like it's like again, like people seem to think that factory farms exist because people are just evil. That's not the case, right? The reality is that factory farms exist because they are just the most sustainable way and the most profitable way of producing animal products. And as we learned from the Earthling Ed video earlier, 99.9% of all meat comes from factory farms. So this guy says he's against factory farms, but he probably buys from factory farms, right?
Dude,
They've done, that's what I'm saying.
they have to feed everyone chickens.
From the egg, that's all they know.
Yeah.
To me, it's some bullshit.
But they
At
have.
least let them fucking run.
How are they supposed to feed 8 billion people chickens?
You're full vegan. No fish, no eggs.
For 8 years.
So, what do you think of organic? Is that a load of bollocks?
Organic is about the food they're fed. And in the UK, organic have different standards for how many birds should be kept in a barn and things like this.
How well is that though? Is it working? Is it doing well?
Well, it depends on whether or not they get investigated and exposed, because this is a.
I only eat organic.
So organic
Free
meats.
range, yeah. Things
Well,
like
free
that.
range doesn't mean organic.
No, that doesn't. The milk and the eggs. I get free range eggs and milk.
Okay,
Meat.
free range eggs are disgusting, by the way. Okay, so we can talk about that. That's different, though.
Yeah.
Free range eggs are about 16,000 in a barn, and what happens is after a while, they produce an egg a day, and they suck the nutrients out of their body, and they start losing feathers, and they die on their faces, suffering, and then they cull them off, and they always.
Okay, this is interesting because you know what? For the longest time, I had no idea why like eating eggs is immoral. I used to think it's because like we're taking away a potential life. That's what I thought, but it's not. So maybe it's helpful to point this out. I don't know how helpful it is to point this out to a vegan audience, but yeah. So when chickens lay eggs, right? They will do so and they will lose nutrients from their bodies and they will experience osteoporosis and all those other kinds of diseases, and they will like, have like weak bones and stuff, right? And that causes tremendous suffering. And in the wild, a chicken will lay, I think, like 10 or 20 eggs in a year, but in our captivity, chickens uh will be made to produce like 300 eggs in a year. So like imagine the kind of suffering we're imposing onto them.
mince the males up alive on their first day of life. So they'll hatch males and females. Okay, the females will go off to be egg layers. That's where you get the eggs from. The males won't. So they cull them straight away. And they go on this conveyor belt and they mince them alive. And they go to fertilizer or pet food.
See, I'd rather not.
So then you
know.
so
I'd rather not.
so now you know.
Research.
Now you know. And when you go buy those free range eggs, what are you doing? Where are you putting your money?
I'm 100%. I'm all for it. One day I hope that what you're saying does change the world.
What you
Because
do does.
My children would never know what meat tastes like if I raised them.
Same with me.
Me, I'm 32. I've always eaten meat.
So,
do you know what I mean?
So did I was 26. Went vegan when I was about 27.
Okay, so Joey said that he has been vegan 8 years. 27, he's 35. Oh, I didn't realize that. I thought he was a bit younger.
If I raised them.
Same with me.
Me, I'm 32. I've always eaten meat.
So,
do you know what I mean?
So did I was 26. Went vegan when I was about 27. I was eating steak, probably eat more meat than you, bro. I was big into it. But then I thought, I hate being a hypocrite, man. Hate it. And if I can avoid it, you can never live without causing zero harm. And that's not what I'm asking people to do. There's places where we cause egregious amounts of suffering that we can easily avoid. And being vegan's the best, most practical way for people to do that.
Again, it's not about like eliminating all harm. It's about doing what we can.
What? This vegan. Only one in his family.
Yeah.
Just one day. I think he's got 6 years.
Yeah.
He's a younger.
Yeah.
Probably 21, something like that. He's in the shape. He's something else.
Yeah.
And I go to him, how do you feel about it? It's mad. I bumped into you today. I spoke to him last week about it.
Yeah.
I went, how do you feel about it? And he went, do you know what? I feel good. He went, I feel better. And he is full on vegan. Nothing.
That's good.
And he went, I highly recommend it. He went, I'm never going back to meat. He went, it's not a matter of, he went, I love it. I like the taste of it. But he went, what it does to your body, and then he's got the pets, and then he's gone more into it on the lines of you for animal.
Yeah.
But he just started off as in he just didn't want to eat meat anymore. And then as he got deeper into it, then he understood this bullshit.
Yeah. Yeah, and then you know what? It's a good feeling being consistent because you say you're against animal cruelty.
Yeah, and that's people talk about the benefits of going vegan, right? I think that's the only benefit that matters is that you are like you're not a hypocrite. Right? That's the only benefit. That's the only benefit you get for which you should go vegan. The environmental benefits, the health benefits, these are selfish benefits, right? Yeah, let's continue.
And it only makes sense that you act in a way that's in alignment with that.
If I lived with someone that could teach me how to.
Well, can I give you? If you go to challenge 22, so challenge and the numbers 22.com, I work with this organization and they do free vegan challenge. You do it on Facebook, it's all free, but you can just go in there and go, okay, so what's my meal plan? What do I have to do today? And they will give you, they've got registered dietitians on there. They've got mentors who help you, who guide you. It's challenge22.com. Yeah. And it's reason.
I've never tried that. I'd like to know if any of you have tried that. Like, how is that? Is it good? Because if it is, then I'm going to start recommending it to people. I don't know if it would work in India, but let me know how is challenge22.com because I've never tried it personally myself. So I'd love to know what you people think in the chat. The chat has been silent for a while. How? So let me know. Let me know what you think of challenge22.com.
It's 22 days is because it takes 21 days to rebuild a new habit. So it's all about changing your habits and knowing what to eat and that. And if you get that down pat, it sounds like you do it pretty easily. But there's also Veganuary. You've got to educate yourself so you know. So then when you make decisions, it's smart to be wised up to those decisions. So then you can teach your kids. Then you're creating a better world for the future because then they can go on and teach their friends. And you're actually making a positive impact because we're all going to die. We might, but the generations that come.
Right, let's just step slightly outside. What's your views on everyone becomes vegan?
Yeah.
So that's a lot of meat taken off the table.
Yeah.
It's got to be replaced with something else. Yeah. How are they going to grow their vegetables without
causing planetary problems? Yeah. But, so those animals right now are being fed plants. So they have to feed a lot more calories to run it through an animal to create their muscle and to sustain this animal. Okay. And then you take a small piece of their flesh. So the distribution of plants, them converting it into their bodies, it's unsustainable. So right now, animal agriculture is using up 83% of the farmland on Earth. And if we all went vegan, there's this big study, right?
Yeah, that's such a fascinating fact, right? 83% of global farmland is dedicated to animal agriculture, but it produces just 18%, not 18%. It produces just 18% of the calories that human beings consume. Such a huge disparity. It produces like 5/6 of the land, takes 5/6 of the land, but produces just 1/6 of the calories. A little over 1/6.
Probably not much into science, but at Oxford University, they said if everyone adopted just a vegan diet alone, they could reduce the Earth's farmland by 75%. Cows need hay, land. Chickens are eating soy from the Amazon. They're deforesting, growing all this cropland and feeding it all to these animals so we can eat a little bit of their flesh. It's really unsustainable and crazy. It's crazy. It's not the way we're eating these animals and feeding the animals.
What did you say?
It's not the way we're eating these animals and feeding the animals our food and just to eat the animals. And our water, these animals drink a lot of water, especially a dairy cow. It's like how many? 1,000 liters of water for 1 liter of milk. It's crazy, dude. It's like they need water to feed their crops that they eat, and they also drink a bunch of water, and then they convert that into a little bit of milk. It's just like it's crazy, dude. We could just get some soybeans, blend them up with water, and you got soy milk.
I haven't tried that. I think I'll try that, making soy milk. I've tried making oat milk, but yeah.
can feed tons of soy to this cow.
I did actually. I went through a stage of drinking the almond.
Yeah, almond milk. Yeah. Yeah. So you're just changing your taste buds, bro.
As I'm getting older, my stomach's only getting worse. I tend to find I'm cutting down on my meat, so I won't eat 2 pork chops.
Yeah.
Rather than eat rice, veg.
It's more fiber. It's better for your stomach.
This is it. So as I'm probably the way things are going, I'm probably going to start going vegetarian by 25. A couple more years, I'll probably be on my own, forced to be it.
Or you could make the decision now, and it would be a moral decision. And it feels better to make, because now you're conscious. You're like, you know what, I could make it.
I've got to get the dishes.
Yeah.
I've got to get the dishes.
Yeah. You need help. That's all you need. Practical ideas.
To me, I don't live for me. I don't go. Yeah, lunchtime. There's gonna be some meat. Shit.
Yeah.
To me personally, my favourite dish is rice.
Yeah.
I love rice and
Rice.
veg. But I eat rice, chicken, and veg.
You can get vegan chicken easy. Yeah, vegan chicken galore. It's mad, and I feel like
What's your corn?
corn. Yeah.
What's that brand? It's
It's
meat.
not- It's made of mushroom, mycoprotein.
Any good?
I like
Or
it.
you
It's
still-
good, but they do vegetarian stuff. I don't eat dairy and eggs, but they have a good vegan range. I personally like. This isn't chicken, but the supermarkets, right? They've got their own branded stuff, and it's really good. So like if you go into Asda, they've got plant-based range. If you go into Tesco, they've got their own plant
I
chef.
so wish that I had all of these things here. You know what? I've never had plant-based meat, and I wish I could try it. Like maybe when I move to a big city, maybe there will be options there. But yeah, it would be amazing if I could, right? But yeah, let's continue.
Range. If you go into Sainsbury's, they've got their what's Sainsbury's one called? They've got their own plant-based range as well. They're doing cheaper, so they're cutting the price down, especially at Tesco, and they're giving like the chickens especially substitutes. They're amazing, but they take the protein out of the plants and they create like a meaty sort of substance with it. But you know,
Okay, folks. So we're about to wrap up because this video is about to end. There's like 3 more minutes here. So if you have any more questions, do use the link in the pinned comment and I'll answer those. But if you have any other questions, you can also leave a comment, just a regular comment, and if I can, I'll try to get to those as well. But yeah, if you make a donation, of course, I'll like try to answer that first. So yeah, if you have any, just get them in now because we're going to wrap up soon. And it's been wonderful hanging out with all of you. Let's continue.
the soya beans that have been processed, I would still say are, better for you than slaughtered chicken. They don't have antibiotics in them. And you're not going to be risk of contamination, E. coli, things like this. You don't have a bird that had the head cut off, And we are not causing the problems with soy. The animal agriculture is because we're growing it all to feed the animals. It's not human-caused problem with soy. It's an animal agriculture-caused problem. So if you go into Iceland, they got amazing vegan chicken in the freezer section. I love it. Iceland, and they got cheap burgers called No Bull burgers. They're really good if you like burger meat. You go on YouTube, right? This is how I learned what I eat in a day vegan, and come up with a million videos on vegan. What do you eat now? Put it in vegan chicken and rice. Boom. Vegan this and that. Vegan chicken replacements UK. Just boom, boom, boom. Anything you want, just think of it. Google it. You find it, bro. Because I don't even think you need much of a push. It's just making a decision.
I don't need a push. I just need a door to open or just someone to go, there you go. That's all it is. I don't need to push it into it.
You seem like all you need to do is type in Google what you need. And you could go to the store and start, where's the vegan section here? You know what I mean?
You know what? I'm off work for 2.5 weeks. So I live in London.
Yeah.
So I'm only here for work.
Yeah.
But I am, do you know any vegan shops?
Vegan shops?
Vegan food, yeah.
Well, it depends if you want stuff to cook at home.
I'm not. Ready-made.
Yeah. Ready-made in a little thing that you can
I
microwave.
don't have a kitchen. I stay in a hotel. So I've got to eat as it is.
Ready meals. If you go into Sainsbury's, they got vegan ready meals.
Is there any restaurants that I can walk in?
Use Happy Cow.
Happy Cow.
Happy Cow. It's an app.
Happy
Cow's an app.
I'm so jealous. I'm so jealous of people in the West who have it's so easy to be vegan there, man. and I wish I was there. Maybe I'll move there sometime and meet all of you. So many of you are in the Western world, right? It would be such an amazing experience.
Happy Cow. And if you want delivery, just go Uber Eats vegan.
Okay, yeah.
And Happy Cow Happy Cow is the best because it shows you not just vegan places, what places have vegan options. You can go into Costa right now; they've got vegan sandwiches. You can go into Starbucks; they've got vegan stuff. Anywhere you go, basically, in England, now you open your mind to it. There's vegan stuff everywhere. It's mad here. It's one of the best countries for it.
Yeah. See, there you go. You might have just changed my life.
No worries, brother. Awesome, brother. Good talking, man. Take care, brother. He said you might have just changed my life. Wow.
It's amazing.
Legend. So he was really interested to learn and he really wanted to.
When people say that Joey Carbstrong methods do not work, show them a video like this, right? Show them a video like this, and all of those people who criticize Joey, he's too militant, he's too this and that. Like, they have never done this stuff, right? So they don't know. I have huge respect for Joey, man. He does amazing work. So yeah.
He just needed to know how. That's interesting. Some people are already there. They just need to know how. That's why showing people how is actually a really important job to do in the movement. The why, I always talk about the why. But once people know the why, they're more open to doing to the how. So, but yeah, what a legend.
So I think that's it, folks. Unless we have something else, unless you have some questions for me to answer, I think we can wrap it up there. It means so much that so many of you tuned in for this amazing live stream, and it means so much. And I think I'll see you in the next one. Thank you so much for tuning in, and bye-bye.